She thinks she's just the queen of everything. Oh, honey, don't say that. Ugh. I mean, her advice is just so old-fashioned. No, honey, it's fine. I could ruin everything with this. Cheers to the happy couple. No, I must keep it to myself.
At my son, Ryan's wedding, I overheard my new daughter-in-law tell her mother that I didn't really have anything and would probably become Ryan's financial responsibility someday. What hurt wasn't Ashley's words. It was seeing Ryan standing close enough to hear them and watching him say nothing. I could have corrected them right there. Inside my purse was a letter from an attorney confirming that Silver Creek Ranch 850 acres in northern Colorado, now belonged entirely to me. But I smiled, finished my coffee, and kept that letter hidden. Thank God I did, because within months I would discover exactly what my son and his new wife were willing to do once they learned what that ranch was really worth. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me this. Would you have stayed quiet at that wedding, or would you have told them the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about family trust and second chances mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe. I'd be glad to have you here. 3 years before I sat at my son's wedding with that letter hidden inside my purse, I became a widow. Richard died on a Tuesday morning in October. It still amazes me that the worst days of our lives can begin so ordinarily. That morning I had made coffee before sunrise, just as I had for most of our 41 years of marriage. Richard had been awake already, sitting at the kitchen table in his old gray robe with his reading glasses halfway down his nose. He was studying the weather page because he planned to clean the gutters before the first real Colorado cold arrived. I told him he was 72 years old and had no business climbing a ladder. He told me I had been saying that since he was 50. Those were almost the last words we exchanged. Less than 2 hours later, Richard collapsed in our hallway. By lunchtime, I was sitting in a hospital room, holding a hand that would never squeeze mine again. People talk about grief as if it arrives like a storm. Mine didn't. Mine arrived as silence. It was the empty chair across from me at breakfast. It was reaching for 2 coffee mugs and realizing I only needed one. It was waking at 2 in the morning because I thought I heard Richard turning over beside me. It was receiving mail addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Richard Bennett and standing beside the mailbox longer than necessary because I couldn't bring myself to throw the envelope away. For 41 years, Richard had been woven into every ordinary part of my life. We had never been glamorous people. He had worked as a civil engineer, and I had spent most of my career keeping books for an agricultural supply company outside Fort Collins. We paid our mortgage, saved carefully, took modest vacations, and drove our cars until the repair bills finally became ridiculous. Richard believed showing off money was one of the quickest ways to attract people who cared about the wrong things. Know what you have, he used to tell me, but you don't have to announce it. After he died, I stayed in the house we had shared. It wasn't enormous. 3 bedrooms, an aging deck, a maple tree. Richard had planted when Ryan was 12, and a kitchen. We had remodeled ourselves badly enough that one cabinet door still hung slightly crooked. I loved every imperfect inch of it. Ryan wanted me to consider moving closer to Denver. At first, I believed his concern was genuine. He called regularly during that first year. Sometimes he came up on Sundays and helped with things Richard would once have handled. He replaced a leaking faucet. He carried boxes into the attic. He sat with me through my first Christmas without his father. Ryan had always been ambitious, but I never thought of that as a flaw. As a boy, he wanted to win everything. Soccer games, science fairs, even family card games. Richard used to tease him about it. "You don't have to turn breakfast into a competition, son." Ryan would grin and say, "Only if I'm winning." As he grew older, though, winning seemed to mean something different. It became promotions, cars, the right neighborhood, knowing people with impressive job titles. By 39, Ryan was a sales manager for a construction equipment company in Denver. He earned a good living, but he always seemed to be measuring himself against somebody earning more. Then he met Ashley. She was polished in a way I had never been. She worked in luxury real estate and could walk into a room full of strangers and know within 10 minutes who had influence, who had money, and who could introduce her to somebody with both. I tried not to judge her for that. More importantly, Ryan loved her. Or at least I believed he did. When they became engaged, I was genuinely happy for him. For the first time since Richard's death, I had something joyful on the calendar. Then 3 months before the wedding, my telephone rang. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. Mrs. Bennett. Yes, my name is David Lawson. I represented Robert Bennett. I knew the name immediately. Robert was Richard's older cousin. He was 81 and had lived most of his adult life on Silver Creek Ranch in northern Colorado. Richard and Robert had been close when they were younger, though age and distance had reduced their visits in later years. Robert never married after losing his wife Ellen, and they had never had children. I had met him dozens of times over the decades. He was quiet, stubborn, and capable of sitting through an entire family dinner while saying fewer than 20 words. "What about Robert?" I asked. There was a pause. "I'm sorry to tell you he passed away last week." I closed my eyes. Another piece of Richard's world was gone. David expressed his condolences, then said something I wasn't expecting. "Mr. Bennett named you in his estate documents. I'd like you to come to my office." I assumed Robert had left me something sentimental. Maybe one of Richard's childhood photographs. Perhaps his grandfather's pocket watch. 3 days later, I sat across from David Lawson in a quiet office in downtown Fort Collins. I was a silver-haired man with the calm voice of someone accustomed to delivering information people needed time to absorb. There was a thick folder on the desk between us. "Robert made several changes to his estate planning after Richard passed," David said. I felt a small ache at the sound of my husband's name. "Was Ryan included?" David looked at me carefully. "No." That surprised me. Ryan was one of the few remaining Bennetts of his generation. David opened the folder. "Robert left Silver Creek Ranch to you." For several seconds I thought I had misunderstood him, the ranch. Yes, all of it. The land improvements, operating interests, and the associated rights described in these documents. I stared at him. Silver Creek wasn't some little weekend property. I remembered driving through it with Richard years earlier. Fields stretching toward distant foothills, cattle grazing beyond weathered fences, a creek catching sunlight between cottonwoods. "I don't understand," I said. "Why me?" David leaned back. Robert was very deliberate. "But Ryan is Richard's son." I raised that point with him. And David hesitated before answering. "Robert said Ryan might someday appreciate what Silver Creek means. But he didn't believe Ryan was ready to decide what should happen to it." That stung, even though the judgment hadn't come from me. What did he think I would do? Protect it long enough to understand it? I looked down at the documents. "I'm 68 years old, David. I've never managed a ranch." He knew that. Then why would he trust me with 1,800 acres, 1,850? I almost laughed from sheer disbelief. David's expression softened. "Robert trusted your judgment, and he trusted Richard's judgment about you." That sentence silenced me. I asked what the ranch was worth. David gave me a cautious answer. I explained that agricultural land values varied, that the ranch had operating income, that there were water rights and easements requiring separate review, and that a proper valuation would take time. I barely understood half of it. "What should I tell Ryan?" I finally asked. David closed the folder. "That's entirely your decision." I drove home without turning on the radio. For the next week, I told no one. Not because I intended to keep the ranch secret forever. I simply wanted to understand what had happened before other people began telling me what I should do with it. 2 weeks later, I drove north to Silver Creek. The first thing I noticed was how enormous the sky seemed. The ranch house sat back from a gravel road, weathered but solid, with a deep porch facing open pasture. Beyond it stood barns, fencing equipment sheds, and miles of land disappearing toward low hills. I parked my old Subaru beside the house and remained behind the wheel for a moment. Then I saw something near the porch, a wooden bench. Richard and I had sat on that same bench nearly 20 years earlier during one of our visits. I could suddenly see him there, his boots dusty, His sleeves rolled up, his face turned toward the hills. He had said something that day I hadn't remembered in years. Land makes people strange, Jordan. I had laughed. What does that mean? Everybody thinks land is just dirt until somebody wants it. At the time, I thought he was being philosophical. Standing there as Silver Creek's new owner, the memory felt different. I walked slowly toward the porch. There was no rush of excitement, no feeling that I had suddenly become wealthy. What I felt was responsibility. Robert had skipped over Ryan and placed something his family had protected for generations directly into my hands. There had to be a reason. And until I understood that reason, I decided Silver Creek would remain my business. Ryan was planning a wedding. Ashley was choosing flowers and seating arrangements. They believed I was simply Richard Bennett's widow, living quietly in the same old Fort Collins house. For the moment, I was comfortable letting them believe it. I stood at the edge of the porch and watched the afternoon sun move across the pasture. Somewhere beyond the cattle, the creek flashed silver between the trees. I thought about Robert. I thought about Richard. And for the first time since David Lawson had placed those documents in front of me, a question settled heavily in my mind. Robert hadn't just given me a ranch. He had trusted me to protect it. I just didn't know yet what I was protecting it from. Ryan and Ashley came back from their honeymoon 10 days after the wedding, sunburned, smiling, and carrying enough photographs from Maui to make me feel as though I had gone with them. By then, the letter from David Lawson was no longer in my purse. It was locked inside a safe deposit box at my bank, along with the most important Silver Creek documents. I had spent the days after the wedding thinking about what I had overheard. Ashley's words still bothered me, but Ryan's silence bothered me more. Still, I told myself not to turn one ugly moment into a judgment on their entire marriage. Families survive because sometimes we allow people the opportunity to be better than their worst moment. So when Ryan called and asked if they could come to Fort Collins for dinner, I said yes. I made pot roast, mashed potatoes, roasted carrots, and the apple crisp. Ryan had loved since childhood. They arrived shortly after 6. Ashley looked beautiful in a cream sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled back neatly. Ryan carried 2 bottles of wine and kissed me on the cheek. "Smells like home," he said. For a while it felt like home too. They showed me honeymoon pictures. Ashley told me about the resort. Ryan complained jokingly about what a single breakfast had cost. We laughed over a photograph of him trying to paddleboard and falling sideways into the water. For nearly an hour, I relaxed. Maybe the wedding conversation had been nothing more than nerves. Maybe I had heard it at the worst possible moment. Then Ashley set down her wine glass. "So Jordan," she said, "Ryan and I were talking about you. There are certain sentences that sound harmless until you hear the tone underneath them." I smiled. "Should I be worried?" Ryan laughed. "No, Mom." Ashley touched his arm. "Not worried. We've just been talking about long-term planning. For yourselves, for everybody." That answer caught my attention. Ashley leaned slightly forward. "I see this all the time with clients. Parents wait until something happens before the family has any idea what the financial picture looks like." I took a sip of coffee. "My financial picture. Just generally." Ryan looked uncomfortable, but he didn't interrupt her. Ashley continued. "Do you still have a mortgage on this house?" The question was so direct that I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "Why, I'm not trying to pry." It sounded exactly like prying. She smiled. "I just know you and Richard bought this place a long time ago. We did, so it's paid off." I looked at Ryan. He suddenly became very interested in his apple crisp. "Mostly," I said. That wasn't technically an answer, but Ashley seemed to accept it. "What about retirement income?" I put down my cup. "What about it? Are you comfortable I haven't missed a meal yet?" Ryan smiled. "Mom." "What?" "We're just making sure you're okay." "I'm okay." Ashley nodded quickly. "Of course. But being okay at 68 is different from planning for 80. There it was. Not today, not tomorrow. My future. A future they had apparently been discussing without me. Ashley asked whether I still received Richard's pension benefits. I told her I did. She asked about Social Security. I told her I had it. Then came the question that finally made me stop pretending this was ordinary dinner conversation. Do you have long-term care insurance? I looked directly at her. Ashley, are you planning to put me somewhere? Ryan nearly choked on his wine. Mom, come on. Ashley immediately raised both hands. No, absolutely not. Because you seem unusually interested in what happens when I can't take care of myself. That isn't what I meant. What did you mean? Ryan stepped in. Ashley works with older clients all the time. She sees families who don't plan. Real estate clients. Yes. And they discuss their long-term care insurance with their realtor. Ashley's smile tightened. Sometimes financial planning affects real estate decisions. That part at least was true. I had spent enough years as a bookkeeper to know that housing, retirement, medical costs, and estate planning were connected. But I also knew the difference between someone asking whether I had a plan and someone trying to calculate what I owned. Ryan leaned toward me. We're not trying to take over your life. Good. We just want to plan ahead. There was that phrase again. Plan ahead. I wondered exactly what they were planning. Ashley glanced around my kitchen. You have a lot of house for one person. I looked around too. The same kitchen where Richard and I had eaten thousands of breakfasts. The hallway where we had marked Ryan's height against the trim when he was a boy. The bedroom where I still slept on my side of the mattress. It doesn't feel like too much to me. I understand. But maintaining a house gets harder. I can still mow my own lawn. I know. And when I can't, I know a teenager down the street who likes money. Ryan laughed. Ashley didn't. There are beautiful senior communities closer to Denver, she said. Not nursing homes, independent living, pools, fitness centers, restaurants. Some are practically resorts. I stared at her. You've been looking just professionally. For me, she paused half a second too long. Not specifically. Ryan reached for my hand. Mom, nobody is asking you to move tomorrow. That's comforting. We're talking 5 years from now. Maybe 10. Ashley nodded. And if you sold this house while the market was strong, you could preserve the equity instead of pouring money into maintenance. Preserve the equity. Not preserve my memories. Not preserve my independence. The equity. Something cold settled in my stomach. I pulled my hand gently away from Ryan's. What if I don't want to sell? Then you don't, he said. Ashley added obviously. But her tone suggested that would be an irrational choice. I looked at my son. Ryan, did you ask Ashley to discuss this with me? He sighed. We've talked about the future. Whose future? All of ours. That answer stayed with me. I stood and began collecting dessert plates. Ashley followed me into the kitchen. I hope I didn't offend you. I'm not offended. That was only partly true. I just think families should talk about money before there's a crisis, she said. I agree. She seemed relieved. Then I added, but the person whose money it is should probably be part of that conversation. Her cheeks colored. That's fair. For the next 15 minutes we changed subjects. Ryan told me about work. Ashley mentioned a listing she had just closed in Cherry Creek. I listened, smiled when appropriate, and wondered what would have happened if I had told them about Silver Creek at the wedding. Would Ashley still be suggesting senior living? Or would she suddenly think I was perfectly capable of managing 1,850 acres? The thought made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to become suspicious of every sentence my daughter-in-law spoke. After dinner, Ryan carried the leftovers to their car, while Ashley helped me put glasses into the dishwasher. That was when she asked the question. Casually. Almost too casually. Jordan, did Richard ever own any investment property? My hand stopped above the dishwasher. I turned toward her. Why do you ask? No reason. People almost always have a reason when they say that. She wiped the counter with a dish towel. Ryan mentioned Richard used to do engineering work all over northern Colorado. I wondered whether he ever bought land. My heartbeat changed. Not enough for her to notice. Enough for me to notice. Richard owned this house with me. I meant other property. I know what you meant. Ashley smiled. Just curious. I studied her face. There was nothing openly hostile there. Nothing I could accuse her of. So I answered truthfully. Richard didn't leave me any ranch. That was true. Robert had. Ashley nodded. Okay. And just like that she dropped the subject. A few minutes later, she and Ryan left. I stood on the porch while their taillights disappeared down my street. The house became quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt useful. I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table. There were two versions of that evening competing in my mind. In one, my son and his new wife genuinely worried about an aging widow and wanted to make sure she would be safe. In the other, they were quietly taking inventory. House, mortgage, pension, insurance, possible property. I didn't know which version was true, and I wasn't ready to condemn them without knowing. But I knew one thing. I was not going to tell them about Silver Creek. Not yet. The next morning, Ashley sent me a text. "Thank you for dinner, and I'm sorry if I got too personal. I just want you to know you'll always have family looking out for you." It was a kind message. I wanted to believe it. I typed back, "Thank you. I know you mean well." Then I put my phone down. Outside my kitchen window, the maple tree Richard had planted moved gently in the Colorado wind. I thought about something he used to tell me whenever I worried that I was being too cautious. "You don't have to decide what someone means, Jordan. Just watch what they do next." So that was exactly what I decided to do. I would watch, I would listen. And until I understood why Ashley had suddenly become curious about whether Richard Bennett had ever owned land Silver Creek would remain exactly where it belonged. Out of their conversations, out of their plans, and completely under my control. About 3 weeks after that dinner, I decided it was finally time to go through the last of Richard's boxes. I had been avoiding them for almost 3 years. They sat on two shelves in the back of our bedroom closet, exactly where I had placed them after his funeral. Every few months, I would open the closet, look at those boxes, and tell myself I would deal with them when I was ready. Grief has a strange way of turning ordinary objects into decisions. A shirt isn't just a shirt. A pair of reading glasses isn't just a pair of glasses. Even an old receipt can feel like evidence that somebody existed. That Saturday morning, I carried the first box into the living room and began sorting. There were engineering magazines, old birthday cards, photographs, notebooks, tax records, and enough pens to supply a small office. Near the bottom, I found a photograph of Richard and Ryan standing beside a fishing boat when Ryan was about 14. Ryan had one arm around his father and the biggest smile on his face. I sat there looking at it longer than I intended. Whatever was happening now, I did not want to forget that version of my son. The boy who waited at the window for his father to come home. The teenager who pretended he was too old for hugs but still hugged Richard when nobody was watching. The young man who cried openly at his father's funeral. That was why suspicion hurt so much. It is easy to distrust a stranger. Distrusting your own child feels like cutting against something inside yourself. I decided Ryan should have some of Richard's things. I packed the fishing photograph, Richard's old compass, a watch that no longer worked, several letters Ryan had written from summer camp, and a handful of other keepsakes into a smaller box. I also included 2 folders of old financial and property records because some documents involved accounts Richard had once opened for Ryan. At the time, I didn't think twice about it. That evening, I drove to Denver. Ryan and Ashley lived in a modern townhouse with enormous windows, pale wood floors, and furniture so carefully arranged that I sometimes felt guilty sitting on it. Ashley was making dinner when I arrived. "Jordan, you should have called," she said, giving me a quick hug. "I did." She laughed. "I mean earlier." Ryan came down the stairs. "What's that?" "Some of your father's things." His expression changed immediately. He took the box from my hands. "You finally went through them some." He carried it into the living room and sat on the couch. When he found the fishing photograph, he smiled. "I remember this. You complained the whole morning because your father made you get up at 5. He said fish didn't care about my schedule." That sounds like him. For several minutes, everything felt normal. Ryan found the old compass and turned it over in his hand. "Dad carried this everywhere." He did. Ashley came in from the kitchen and looked through a few photographs with us. She was kind that evening. Genuinely, I thought. That made what happened later more difficult. During dinner, Ashley received a business call. She stepped into her office. Ryan and I talked about his work until he went to the garage to bring in another bottle of wine. I offered to help Ashley with dessert, but she called from her office that everything was already prepared. So I went looking for the downstairs bathroom. As I reached the hallway, I heard Ashley's voice. She had finished her call. Now she was speaking to Ryan. I stopped because I heard my name. You really think Jordan has nothing else? Ryan lowered his voice. I told you I've seen most of Mom and Dad's finances. Most isn't all. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood perfectly still. Ashley continued. If we're serious about the house on Crestview, we need to know what our long-term picture looks like. That has nothing to do with Mom. It does if you're going to be responsible for her later. There it was again. Responsible for me. Ryan sighed. She has the Fort Collins house. It's probably worth $550, maybe $600. And retirement, normal retirement accounts. Life insurance from your dad. Some. Nothing huge. A pause followed. Then Ashley said, You're her only child. I felt my stomach tighten. I know. So eventually everything she has comes to you. Ryan didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Probably. That single word hurt more than I expected. Probably. As though my life were a waiting period before assets changed hands. Ashley lowered her voice again. If we knew the numbers, we could make better decisions. What do you want me to do? Ask Mom what I get when she dies? No. Obviously not. Then what you said your dad handled investments. He did some. Property, I don't know. Then find out. My heart began beating hard. Ryan said, Ashley, what I'm not saying steal anything. I'm saying know what exists. That's responsible. Responsible. People can make almost anything sound respectable if they choose the right word. I heard Ryan move. We're not buying Crestview based on money Mom might leave me. Fine. Ashley's tone suggested it was anything but fine. But if there are assets, pretending they don't exist doesn't make us noble. I heard footsteps coming toward the hallway. I moved quickly. By the time Ryan appeared, I was standing near the bathroom door. He looked surprised. Everything okay? Couldn't remember which door. He pointed. That one. Thank you. I went inside and closed the door. For a moment, I simply stared at myself in the mirror. Part of me wanted to march back into the kitchen and tell them everything I had heard. Another part wanted to announce Silver Creek just to see their faces. But then Richard's voice came back to me. Watch what they do next. So I washed my hands and returned to dinner. I smiled. I ate dessert. I asked Ashley about work, and I said nothing. When I was ready to leave, Ryan carried Richard's box upstairs. I'm going to keep this in my office, he said. Take your time going through it. I will. I kissed him goodbye. The drive home felt longer than usual. I kept replaying the conversation. I wanted to defend Ryan to myself. He had pushed back. He had told Ashley they weren't buying a house based on an inheritance. That mattered. But he had also said that everything I owned would probably become his. And he hadn't objected when Ashley told him to find out whether Richard had owned property. 2 days later, Ryan called. Mom, I think you left some papers here. What papers? Old financial stuff of Dad's. I knew exactly what had been in the box. I thought there were a couple folders. Yeah. I grabbed them when I was looking for some of Dad's old fishing pictures. Fishing pictures were not inside those folders. I said nothing. I'll bring them by after work. That's fine. Ryan arrived around 7. He handed me 2 folders. Sorry. No problem. He kissed my cheek and left 15 minutes later. I carried the folders into the kitchen. Years of bookkeeping had taught me something useful. Paper has memory. People think they can put documents back exactly where they found them. Usually they can't. The first folder contained old insurance statements and retirement records. Nothing seemed disturbed. The second contained property-related papers Richard had kept for historical reasons. I opened. The order was wrong. I knew because Richard had arranged documents chronologically. Always. Now a 2008 document sat ahead of one from 2003. A survey map had been folded differently, and 3 papers were upside down. I spread everything across the kitchen table. Most concerned engineering projects Richard had worked on years earlier. Then I found what Ryan had probably noticed. A faded survey showing portions of northern Colorado. Near one edge were the words, Bennett Family Holdings. Silver Creek was not named prominently, but the location was there. So was Robert Bennett's name. I sat down. Maybe Ryan had simply been curious about his father's past. Maybe he had seen the map and thought nothing of it. But Ashley's question returned to me. Did Richard ever own any investment property? Then her words from the hallway. Then find out. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that the questions might not be random. Ashley worked in real estate. She had professional reasons to understand property records. Ryan worked around construction companies. Neither of those facts proved anything. But I was done leaving important documents where curiosity could reach them. The following morning, I drove to my bank. I rented a larger safe deposit box. Into it went the Silver Creek deed, Robert's estate documents, David Lawson's correspondence, Richard's older property records, and every paper I considered financially significant. At home, I changed the password on my online banking. I ordered a credit report. I reviewed beneficiaries. I checked account permissions. Nothing was wrong. No unauthorized transactions. No mysterious changes. That should have made me feel foolish. Instead, it made me feel prepared. I wasn't accusing my son of stealing from me. I wasn't cutting him out of my life. I was simply putting a lock on a door that had previously been open because I had assumed nobody I loved would ever try the handle. That evening, Ryan called again. Did you find everything in Dad's folders? I did. Good. There was a pause. Then he asked Mom who exactly was Robert Bennett. I gripped the phone slightly tighter. Your father's cousin. I know that. I mean, were they close? When they were younger. What did Robert do? He ran a ranch. Another pause. Where northern Colorado. Ryan sounded casual when he responded. Huh. I didn't know Dad's family still had land up there. I looked through the kitchen window toward Richard's maple tree. No, I said quietly. There were a lot of things your father didn't talk about. Ryan changed the subject. But after we hung up, I remained by that window for a long time. Until then, I had been telling myself Ashley was simply overly interested in money. Now Ryan was asking about Robert. And somewhere between that wedding, the questions about my finances, the missing folders, and the old Bennett survey, something had shifted. I still loved my son. I still wanted to believe the best of him. But love did not require blindness. For the first time since inheriting Silver Creek, I understood why keeping quiet might be more than privacy. It might be protection. And I was beginning to wonder whether Robert Bennett had known I would eventually need it. The morning after Ryan asked me about Robert Bennett, I called Sam Carter. I had met Sam briefly during my first visit to Silver Creek, but at the time, I had been too overwhelmed to ask many questions. He had introduced himself as the ranch manager, handed me a ring of keys, and told me I could call him any time. Until then, I hadn't. Mrs. Bennett, he said when he answered. Jordan, please. All right, Jordan. I think I need to understand what I own. There was a short silence. Then Sam said, I've been wondering when you'd say that. 2 days later, I drove north before sunrise. The farther I got from Fort Collins, the more the landscape opened around me. Neighborhoods gave way to fields. Traffic thinned. The mountains remained in the distance while the morning light spread across miles of Colorado grassland. Silver Creek looked different this time. On my first visit, I had seen it through grief. Every fence post had reminded me of Richard. Every room in the ranch house had seemed to contain the ghost of a family history I wasn't sure belonged to me. This time I tried to see it as an owner. That word still felt strange. Owner. Sam was waiting beside one of the barns when I arrived. I was 62, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face, and the kind of hands that looked as if they had spent 40 years repairing things. His jacket was faded at the elbows, and his boots were covered in dust. You brought the Subaru again, he said. What's wrong with my Subaru? Nothing, if we stay on the decent roads. And if we don't? He pointed toward an old pickup. We take that. I laughed. It felt good. Sam poured coffee from a thermos into 2 metal cups and spread a ranch map across the hood of his truck. Silver Creek covered roughly 1,850 acres. On paper, it looked even larger than it felt. Sam showed me the grazing areas, the barns, the main house, the creek, the equipment sheds, the boundary fences, and the southern portion of the property. How many cattle? I asked. Depends on the season. We adjust based on grass and water. Robert never believed in pushing the land harder than it could handle. Does the ranch make money? Sam gave me a look. That's a very bookkeeper question. I was one for 34 years. Then you'll like the answer. Yes, but it's not making anybody rich. That reassured me more than it disappointed me. He explained the operating costs, grazing arrangements, equipment expenses, payroll taxes, and income. I understood those numbers. They were real. Cattle went out, checks came in, fuel cost money, fences broke. That world made sense. What didn't make sense was why developers kept calling. I asked Sam directly. He folded the map. Come on. We climbed into his pickup. The ranch road was rough enough that I quickly understood why he had insulted my Subaru. We drove past a barn, crossed a cattle guard, and followed a dirt track toward the southern boundary. The land changed gradually. The open pasture narrowed near a long ridge. Cottonwoods followed the creek in the distance, their branches moving in the wind. Sam stopped near an old fence. We got out. This is the southern section, he said. I looked around. It was beautiful, but nothing about it screamed 21st century development opportunity. What am I supposed to be seeing right now? Cow's grass fence that I can manage. Sam smiled. Robert liked you. The comment surprised me. He barely talked to me. That meant he liked you. I laughed again. Sam leaned against the truck. About 6 years ago, developers started buying property farther east. Then another company acquired acreage beyond that ridge. He pointed. Robert started getting calls. What kind of calls? People wanting meetings. People offering to buy sections. People asking about access. How much were they offering? Enough that I asked Robert whether he'd lost his mind when he said no. That got my attention. You thought he should sell, I thought he should listen. And he told me listening was how people got you to imagine money you didn't need. That sounded like someone Richard would have loved. Sam continued. Then the offers got more aggressive. Aggressive how? More zeros. That's not exactly aggressive. For Robert it was. I crossed my arms against the wind. Who was making the offers? Different groups at first. Lately mostly one. He looked at me. Horizon Ridge Development. The name meant nothing to me then. I repeated it so I would remember. Horizon Ridge. They've called 3 times since Robert died. Did you tell David every time? What do they want? That depends which version you believe. What's their version? Sam pointed across the fence. They say they want acreage for future residential development. And your version? They don't care about the cattle. I smiled. I assumed that. They don't care about the ranch house either, or the barns, or most of the land. Then what are they buying? Sam studied me for a moment. That's the right question. He opened the truck door and pulled out another rolled map. This one was more detailed. There were boundary lines, marking symbols, and notations I didn't understand. Sam traced a finger along the southern edge of Silver Creek. There's more tied to this property than acreage. What does that mean? Water for one thing. I looked toward the creek. They want the creek, not exactly. Then what water rights? I knew enough about Colorado to know those 2 words mattered, but I didn't know how much. Sam pointed toward another marked area. Then there's access to what the properties beyond us. I looked toward the ridge again. There are other roads. There are. So why do they need ours? Need is a strong word. He rolled the map halfway closed. Let's say ours makes certain things much easier. How much easier? That's where you need David. I frowned. You know the answer. I know enough to know I shouldn't explain legal rights I don't control. Sam, I own this place and barely understand why people want it. That's why Robert hired good lawyers. There was no criticism in his voice. Still, I felt embarrassed. I had inherited something generations of Bennetts understood better than I did. Sam must have seen it on my face. Robert didn't expect you to know everything on day 1. Then what did he expect? That you wouldn't panic? I'm considering it. Don't. We stood quietly for a while. Wind moved through the grass. In the distance, cattle clustered near a watering area. It was peaceful enough that the idea of developers fighting over it seemed absurd. Did Richard know about all this? I asked. Sam looked toward the ridge. Some of it. How much enough? Why didn't he tell me? You'd have to ask him. I would if I could. Sam nodded. Sorry. It's all right. He hesitated before continuing. Richard and Robert talked about Silver Creek more than you probably knew. That surprised me whenever Richard came through this part of the state. Sometimes he'd stop for lunch. Sometimes they'd walk the southern boundary. About mostly what Robert should do with the place. I stared at him. Richard never mentioned that. Maybe he didn't think it was his story to tell. That sounded exactly like my husband. Richard could keep another person's confidence like a locked vault. Did Robert ever talk about selling? Not seriously. Why? Sam's expression changed. Because he believed once certain rights left the ranch, they'd never come back. That sentence stayed with me. We drove farther south. Sam showed me an old service road cutting between two sections of pasture. It didn't look important, just gravel and dirt. Developers have asked about this road more times than I can count, he said. This. It barely qualifies as a road. That doesn't mean the corridor isn't valuable. I looked from the road to the distant ridge. Sam, tell me something honestly. I'll try. If Silver Creek were just 1,850 acres of ordinary ranch land, would Horizon Ridge still be calling no? The answer came immediately. Then what are they really after? Sam looked down the road. They're not interested in what's grazing on this land, Jordan. He pointed toward the ground and then toward the boundary. They're interested in what runs underneath it and beside it. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the wind. Water partly. And the rest, talk to David. For once I didn't argue. On the drive back to the ranch house, Sam told me Robert had received another inquiry only weeks before his death. Horizon Ridge had requested a formal meeting. Robert refused. Did he give a reason? Same reason he always gave. What was that? Sam imitated Robert's gravelly voice. If somebody wants something badly enough to keep asking after I say no, I probably ought to understand why before I ever say yes. I smiled. I'm beginning to like him more now that he's gone. Most people did. Back at the ranch house, I walked onto the porch alone. From there, Silver Creek looked endless. A month earlier, I had seen land. Now I saw questions, water rights, access, developers, Richard's private conversations with Robert, and a man who had deliberately placed all of it in my hands instead of my son's. I thought about Ryan asking who Robert was. I thought about the Bennett survey he had disturbed. At that moment, I had no evidence connecting my son to anything happening at Silver Creek. I reminded myself of that. I refused to build accusations out of coincidence. But I also refused to ignore what was directly in front of me. Before leaving, I called David Lawson. He answered on the third ring. Jordan. David. I spent the morning with Sam. There was a pause. I see. He told me to ask you about the water rights. Another pause. And the southern access corridor. This silence lasted longer. Finally, David said, I think it's time we had that conversation. When tomorrow, if you're available. I am. Come to my office at 10. I'll pull Robert's complete property file. I looked across the pasture. David, is Silver Creek worth more than you told me? His answer was careful. The acreage isn't the most important part of what Robert left you. My grip tightened around the phone. What is I'd rather show you on the maps? That was enough. After we hung up, I remained on the porch. A hawk circled above the fields. The creek caught the afternoon light flashing silver between the cottonwoods. Somewhere beneath the beauty of that place was a value I still didn't understand. And apparently other people understood it very well. For the first time, I wondered whether Robert had left Silver Creek to me because he trusted me, or because he knew someone would eventually come looking for it. I was supposed to meet David Lawson at 10 the next morning. Before I could get there, Ashley gave me the first piece of information that changed everything. Ryan called around noon and invited me to dinner in Denver that Saturday. Ashley has something she wants to celebrate, he said. What if I tell you she'll kill me? That sounds serious. It's work, Mom. Nothing bad. I smiled despite myself. All right, I'll be there. I spent the next few days trying not to connect every conversation with Ryan and Ashley to Silver Creek. David had shown me enough to understand that Sam was right. The ranch involved more than cattle and acreage. But David wanted additional records before giving me the complete explanation, particularly documents involving the Southern Corridor and older water rights. He promised we would finish that conversation the following week, so I waited. Saturday evening I drove to Denver. Ryan and Ashley's townhouse looked especially polished that night. Candles burned on the dining table. A bottle of expensive champagne sat in an ice bucket. Ashley greeted me with unusual warmth. "We have good news. I assumed somebody won the lottery." "Better." Ryan laughed. "Depending on who you ask." We sat down, and Ashley lifted her champagne glass. "I landed a new client. Congratulations." Not just any client. Her eyes were bright with the excitement I had seen whenever she talked about an important listing. This could move me into a completely different level of business. Ryan raised his glass. "To my very talented wife." We toasted. I meant it sincerely. Whatever reservations I had about Ashley, I never resented her success. What kind of client, I asked. Development. Something inside me became alert. Ashley continued. "They're putting together a major residential project in northern Colorado. High-end homes, open space planning trails, maybe some mixed-use components depending on county approvals." I held my glass without drinking. "What company?" "Horizon Ridge Development." For 1 second, every sound in the room seemed to disappear. Sam's voice came back to me. "Mostly one company, Horizon Ridge Development." I set my glass down carefully. Ryan didn't notice. Ashley certainly didn't. "They're a serious group," she continued. "Not one of those little developers buying 20 acres and throwing up identical houses. We're talking a project that could eventually be worth hundreds of millions." "That sounds ambitious." "It is." "Where exactly?" "Northern Colorado." She laughed. "I can't give you every detail yet. Confidential, some of it." I nodded. Years of bookkeeping had taught me how to keep my face neutral while somebody said something important. Ashley leaned back. "The hardest part with projects like this isn't always finding buyers. It's assembling the land and rights before construction can even begin." There was that word, rights. I looked at her. "What kind of rights?" She shrugged. "Access, utilities, water, easements. All the boring things nobody thinks about when they look at a beautiful finished neighborhood." I almost smiled. They no longer sounded boring to me. Ryan cut into his steak. "Ashley has spent the last week staring at maps. You'd be amazed how complicated land deals can get," she said. "I'm beginning to understand that." She glanced at me. Something in my answer may have sounded different because she studied me for half a second. Then Ryan changed the subject. "They're looking at thousands of acres." "Not all owned by one person," Ashley added. "That would make my life much easier." "Are the owners willing to sell some?" "And the others?" She smiled. "Everybody has a number." The certainty in her voice bothered me. "Do they?" Ashley laughed. "Eventually." Ryan pointed his fork at me. "Mom would be terrible in real estate." "Why?" "Because she'd feel guilty negotiating." "I kept books for 34 years. I know how numbers work." "That's not what I mean." Ashley smiled. "Ryan says you and Richard were never very interested in money." I looked at my son. "Did he?" He shrugged. "In the good way." "What's the good way?" "You were comfortable. You didn't obsess over it." I thought about Richard tracking every investment in a yellow legal pad. He hadn't obsessed over money, but he had understood it extremely well. "That's different from not understanding it," I said. Ryan lifted both hands. "I surrender." Ashley laughed. Then she said something that nearly made me drop my fork. "Honestly, Jordan, if you owned a few hundred acres where Horizon Ridge is looking, I could probably make you rich." Ryan laughed. "Can you imagine Mom owning hundreds of acres?" I looked directly at him. For a brief moment I wondered whether he knew, whether the question about Robert had already led him somewhere, but his expression seemed genuinely amused. Ashley joined in. "We'd have to get her a cowboy hat. I'd look terrible in one. You'd look adorable." I smiled. Inside, I was thinking about 1,850 acres. How rich, I asked. Ashley's eyes lit up. Depends on the parcel. Give me a number. Ryan looked surprised. Since when do you care? Since somebody told me I could become rich. Ashley laughed. For the right land, millions. I let that sit between us. And what would I do with millions? Ryan answered immediately. Anything you wanted. I already do most of what I want. That's because your wants are cheap. He meant it as a joke. I knew that. Still, I heard the wedding conversation again. She doesn't really have anything. I smiled at my son. Maybe that's why I sleep well. Ashley took a sip of champagne. You could travel. I can travel now. Buy a nicer house. I like my house. Upgrade your car. My Subaru starts every morning. Ryan laughed. She's impossible. No, I said. I just never understood buying something because another person thinks I should want it. Ashley tilted her head. That's actually kind of admirable. Kind of. I almost laughed. Dinner continued. Ashley described meetings planning consultants, engineers, and investors. She never mentioned Silver Creek, not once. That mattered. If she already knew I owned it, she was putting on an extraordinary performance. I began leaning toward coincidence. A strange coincidence, certainly. But northern Colorado was growing. Developers were everywhere. Maybe Horizon Ridge had hired Ashley without any connection to me. Maybe Ryan's curiosity about Robert had nothing to do with her client. I wanted that explanation to be true. Then Ashley said, there is one holdout property that could become a headache. My fingers tightened around my napkin. Ryan looked up. The old ranch. Ashley gave him a quick glance. Ryan. What I didn't say where. You're not supposed to talk about client details. Mom doesn't know anybody involved. I said nothing. Ashley sighed. It's not important. What old ranch? I asked casually. She shook her head. Just a property in the general project area. Owner won't sell. The previous owner wouldn't. Previous owner. My heartbeat became louder. What about the current one? They're still sorting that out. That answer was wrong. The ownership had already been transferred to me. David had confirmed it. County records would eventually show it if they didn't already. Ryan drank his wine. Imagine sitting on land somebody desperately needs and not selling. Ashley nodded. Exactly. I looked from one to the other. Maybe the owner likes the land. Ryan shrugged. Everybody says that until they see enough zeros. I heard Robert in my mind. Listening was how people got you to imagine money you didn't need. I put down my fork. Maybe some things aren't for sale. Ashley smiled politely. In real estate, almost everything is for sale. I didn't answer. After dinner, Ryan went upstairs to take a work call. Ashley and I carried plates into the kitchen. For a few minutes we worked quietly. Then she said, I hope you didn't think I was being materialistic. About what all that talk about money. I think money is part of your job. It is. She rinsed a plate. I just like what it can do. So do I. She looked surprised. I thought you said you didn't care about it. I said I don't care about buying things just to impress people. That's different. Very. She smiled. Maybe for the first time we understood each other slightly better. Then she said, if I ever get this Horizon Ridge deal across the finish line, Ryan and I might finally be able to buy the house we've been looking at. Crestview. The house I had overheard them discussing. Suddenly the conversation in the hallway took on a new shape. They needed to understand their long-term financial picture. Ashley wanted Ryan to investigate Bennett family property. Now Ashley was working for a company trying to acquire an old ranch in northern Colorado. My ranch. I didn't know whether those facts connected, but there were too many of them now to ignore. When I left, Ryan hugged me. Drive safe, I always do. Ashley hugged me too. Next dinner is your place. Deal. I walked toward my Subaru. Behind me, Ryan called out Mom. I turned. If you ever secretly own 500 acres somewhere, Ashley gets first shot at the listing. He laughed. Ashley laughed. I forced myself to laugh too. If I ever discover 500 acres in my purse, I'll call her. I drove away. At the first red light, I stopped smiling. When I reached Fort Collins, I didn't go directly home. I pulled into a quiet parking lot and called David Lawson. He answered despite the late hour. Jordan. David, I need to ask you something. All right. Have you ever heard of Horizon Ridge Development Silence? Not confusion. Silence. That told me enough. Yes, he finally said. My stomach tightened. They hired my daughter-in-law. Another silence. This one was longer. For what she says, she's working on a large residential project in northern Colorado. David exhaled slowly. Jordan, I think we should move our meeting up. To when Monday morning. What aren't you telling me? I wasn't hiding anything. I was waiting until I had the complete records. Do you have them now? I received the final title materials yesterday. I looked through the windshield at the empty parking lot. Tell me one thing tonight. All right. Is Horizon Ridge interested in Silver Creek because they want to build houses on my ranch, Num? That answer surprised me. Then why do they want it? They don't need most of your land. Sam said almost the same thing. Sam was right. Then what do they need? David paused. The easiest route into what they're planning runs through rights attached to Silver Creek. I thought about Ashley's words over dinner. Access, water, easements, all the boring things nobody thinks about. Could they build their project without us? Possibly. That sounds like a lawyer's answer. It is. What's the non-lawyer answer? It would become much more complicated and potentially much more expensive. I closed my eyes. So Silver Creek matters, very much, and Robert knew yes. Did Richard? Another pause. Yes. That hurt in a way I hadn't expected. My husband had known something important about Silver Creek and never told me. Why would Richard keep that from me? I can't answer that. Can you answer why Robert left it to me instead of Ryan? I can tell you what Robert told me. What? David's voice softened. He believed Richard trusted you to know the difference between a valuable offer and a dangerous one. I looked down at my hands. Monday at 10. 9 if you can. I'll be there. I drove home slowly. That night, I took out an old photograph of Richard. I placed it on the kitchen table and sat across from him. You could have warned me, I whispered. Of course he didn't answer. But I remembered something he had said years ago. Money doesn't change everybody, Jordan. Sometimes it just gives them permission to show you who they already were. I had always thought he was talking about other people. Now my son's wife was working for the very company that wanted something from land I had inherited in secret. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe it wasn't. I still didn't know. But for the first time since the wedding, I was profoundly grateful I had kept my mouth shut. Because Ashley believed I was a widow with a modest house, an old Subaru, and an ordinary retirement. And as long as she believed that she had no reason to perform for me, all I had to do was watch. At 9 o'clock Monday morning, I sat across from David Lawson with a cup of coffee. I had no intention of drinking. His conference table was covered with maps. Not one map, 6. Some showed property boundaries. Others showed roads, utility corridors, drainage areas, and lines. I couldn't interpret without help. A large aerial photograph of Silver Creek sat in the center. David closed the conference room door. You asked what Robert was protecting, he said. Yes, today I'm going to show you. I leaned forward. Start with the simplest version. He smiled faintly. That's probably wise. He placed his finger on the aerial photograph. This is Silver Creek. I recognized the ranch house, the barns, the creek, and the southern boundary Sam had shown me. David pointed east. These parcels are controlled by entities associated with Horizon Ridge. There were several of them. Together they formed a large block of land. So they already own all that, some directly, some under purchase agreements or options. And this is where they want to build. Broadly, yes. I studied the map. Then why do they care about my ranch? David took a pencil and drew an imaginary line from the Horizon Ridge parcels toward a major county road. The development needs practical access. There are roads over there. There are. So use them. They can. I waited. But the alternatives require additional land acquisition, road improvements, engineering negotiations, and potentially significant changes to the current site plan. How significant? Potentially tens of millions of dollars. I stared at him. And Silver Creek. He tapped the southern section. This corridor provides a far more efficient connection. I remembered standing beside that unimpressive dirt road with Sam. That old road. The physical road isn't the important part. What is the corridor? David explained that the ranch's historical property rights included a strip of land positioned in a way that could provide access between the proposed development and existing transportation infrastructure. The developer couldn't simply widen my ranch road and start sending traffic through. They would need agreements, rights, approvals, control. And Robert refused repeatedly. Why? Because access was only one part of it. Of course it was. David pulled another map toward me. Blue markings followed the creek and crossed several portions of the property. Water, I said. Water. He began explaining Colorado water rights. I stopped him after about 2 minutes. David, imagine I'm 5. He laughed. All right. In Colorado, owning land and having the legal right to use water are not necessarily the same thing. That much I understand. Silver Creek has senior water rights attached to historical uses. Senior means older. In simple terms, yes. And in Western water law, older rights can be extremely important. How important? Very. That word again. I looked at the blue lines. So Horizon Ridge wants my water. They want certainty. What does that mean? Large residential developments need reliable water planning. They need to demonstrate that water demands can be met. There are different ways to structure that, and I don't want to oversimplify it. But rights associated with Silver Creek could be valuable in helping solve part of that problem. Could they take them? No. Could the county force me to sell, not simply because a private developer wants them? That relieved me. David continued. There are also easements. I sighed. Another map, another map. He slid one toward me. This one contained several lines crossing the southern property. Some are old, some involve utilities, some relate to access. None gives Horizon Ridge everything it wants. So they need me. They need cooperation from the owner of Silver Creek if they want the easiest version of their plan. I sat back. For the first time, the entire situation became visible. Not perfectly, but enough. Robert hadn't been sitting on ordinary ranch land while developers threw money at him. He had been sitting on leverage. How much is Silver Creek worth? I asked. David folded his hands. As a working ranch, yes. He gave me a broad estimate that was substantial enough to make me swallow. It was more money than Richard and I had ever possessed. Then David said, but that's not the relevant question. What is Silver Creek worth to someone whose larger project depends on acquiring specific rights attached to it? And the answer, whatever the economics of that larger project can justify. I stared at him. So potentially much more. Yes. How much more I won't speculate without an offer. That was probably why he was a good attorney. I would have preferred speculation. David opened a folder. Robert received several approaches over the years. He showed me copies. The earliest offers were relatively straightforward attempts to purchase acreage. Later proposals became more sophisticated. Access agreements, water-related negotiations, easement modifications, options. One proposal included numbers large enough that I read them twice. Robert turned this down, yes. Why he didn't trust what would happen afterward, to the ranch, to everything. 2. David explained that once certain permanent rights were transferred, Silver Creek could remain physically present while losing much of what made it independent as a working ranch. The land might still exist, but its future could be determined by agreements that outlived me, Ryan, and everyone currently involved. I thought about Robert refusing meeting after meeting. He really never wanted to sell. Robert wasn't opposed to money. That surprises me. I was opposed to being impressed by it. I smiled. That sounds familiar. Richard. Yes. David looked down at the documents. There's something you should know about Richard. My smile disappeared. What he and Robert discussed this situation years ago, Sam told me. Then you know part of it. Why didn't Richard tell me? I can't answer for him. But you know what they discussed, some of it. I waited. David opened another folder. Several years before Richard died, Robert was considering how to structure the future of Silver Creek. He was concerned that if he left it without careful planning, it might be sold quickly. To Ryan. Not specifically at first, but eventually David chose his words carefully. Robert considered members of the Bennett family. Ryan was obviously among them. My chest tightened, and he decided against him. Yes. Because Ryan likes money, that would be unfairly simple. Then make it complicated. David looked directly at me. Robert believed Ryan was a good man who had become increasingly interested in proving himself through financial success. I thought about Ryan's expensive watch, his conversations about promotions, the Crestview house. Ashley. That sounds like Richard. It was Richard. I went still. What Richard expressed that concern. I stared at David. When, years ago, my husband told Robert not to leave the ranch to our son No. The answer came quickly. Richard never instructed Robert about his estate. He would not have done that. Then what did he say? David hesitated. I wasn't present for every conversation. But Robert repeated one particular remark more than once. I waited. David looked at the map before continuing. Richard said, if anything happens to me, Jordan won't sell something just because somebody puts enough zeros on a check. For a moment I couldn't speak. I could hear Richard saying it. Not because I remembered those exact words, but because the rhythm was his. I looked down before David could see my eyes fill. He really said that. According to Robert, yes. I laughed softly through the tears. He knew me. It appears so. I wiped my cheek. He also knew I hate paperwork like this. David smiled. I suspect that was less important to him. We sat quietly. Then something occurred to me. David, when Robert left Silver Creek to me, did he know Horizon Ridge was still interested? Yes. How recently had they contacted him? Less than 2 months before his death. I felt a chill. What did they offer? They requested negotiations rather than making a final offer. Did Robert respond? Yes. What did he say? David opened another document. He declined. That's all almost. He handed me a copy of Robert's letter. It was brief, professional. But the final sentence made me smile. The future of Silver Creek will not be decided by urgency manufactured by people who do not own it. I read it twice. I wish I had known him better. He was difficult. So was Richard. That may explain why they got along. I laughed. Then my thoughts returned to Ashley. Horizon Ridge hired my daughter-in-law. David nodded. Does that worry you? Yes. Why? Because we don't know whether they hired her before or after learning about your ownership. My stomach tightened. You think they might know ownership records aren't secrets forever. But Ashley clearly doesn't know. Are you certain? I thought about dinner. Her excitement had seemed genuine. So had Ryan's joke about me owning hundreds of acres. I think so. Then don't assume otherwise. What should I do? Nothing. I stared at him. Nothing. Nothing impulsive. That was different. David advised me not to contact Horizon Ridge, not to confront Ashley, not to tell Ryan. If anyone approached me officially, I should direct them to him. Most importantly, he said, do not sign anything related to Silver Creek without independent review. I wouldn't. I mean anything. I spent 34 years checking invoices people swore were correct. Good. He gathered the maps. One more thing. What? Robert understood pressure would come eventually. From Horizon Ridge. From anyone who recognized the strategic value. David tapped the southern boundary. Once people understand that one owner controls something they need, they rarely begin with their highest offer. What do they begin with? Persuasion. And after persuasion depends on the people involved. I thought about Ashley saying everybody had a number. I thought about Ryan asking who Robert was. Then I thought about the power of attorney. I had not yet been asked to sign, but about the increasing interest in my finances that had already begun. At that moment, I still wanted to believe my son was separate from the business surrounding Silver Creek. I wanted desperately to believe it. David walked me to the elevator. Before the doors opened, I turned to him. Why me, David? He knew what I meant. Robert could have created a trust. He could have sold. He could have given it to a conservation organization. Why put all this on me? David considered the question. Because he believed legal structures can protect property, but eventually somebody still has to make decisions. And he chose me. He did. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. David remained in the hallway. Jordan. Yes, Robert didn't leave you Silver Creek because he expected you to know everything. Then why? Because he expected you to ask questions before saying yes. The doors closed. I drove home with copies of the maps beside me. Silver Creek was no longer simply the ranch Richard's cousin had left me. It was water, access, history, leverage, and responsibility. For the first time, I understood why Robert had protected it so fiercely. What I did not yet understand was how quickly the people closest to me would begin trying to reach it. Ryan came to my house alone the following Thursday. That was unusual enough to make me suspicious before he even stepped through the door. Since the wedding, he and Ashley had become almost inseparable socially. If Ryan came to Fort Collins, Ashley usually came too. If she couldn't, he normally had a reason, helping me with something, dropping something off, or passing through town for work. That Thursday, he arrived at 4 in the afternoon carrying a leather folder. No toolbox. No groceries. No excuse. Just the folder. I opened the door and smiled. This is a surprise. Good surprise, I hope. That depends. Did you come to fix something? He laughed and kissed my cheek. Can't I visit my mother? You can. You just usually call first. I was nearby. Ryan walked into the kitchen and put the folder on the table. I noticed it immediately. I didn't ask. Instead, I made coffee. For the first 15 minutes, we talked about ordinary things. His job was busy. Ashley was preparing for several meetings. They were still discussing the house on Crestview, but hadn't made an offer. He asked whether I had scheduled the furnace inspection. I told him I had. Then he asked whether I had given any more thought to moving closer to Denver. No. None. I thought about it long enough to decide I don't want to. He smiled. You're stubborn. You inherited that. From Dad. From both of us. His smile faded slightly at the mention of Richard. For a moment I felt guilty for being suspicious. This was my son. I had changed his diapers. I had sat beside his bed when he had pneumonia at 9. I had driven 6 hours through a snowstorm when he was in college because he had called me after a breakup and insisted he was fine in the exact voice that told me he wasn't. There are memories a mother carries that no betrayal can erase. That is what makes boundaries so painful. You are not protecting yourself from a stranger. You are protecting yourself from someone you would once have trusted with everything. Ryan stirred sugar into his coffee. Actually, there is something I wanted to talk about. I looked at the leather folder. I assumed so. He followed my eyes and smiled. It's nothing dramatic. That phrase usually comes before something dramatic. Mom, what, can you just hear me out? I leaned back. I'm listening. Ryan opened the folder. Inside were several neatly organized documents with colored tabs. My old bookkeeping instincts woke immediately. What is that, estate planning? I said nothing. Ryan continued. Ashley and I have been doing some of our own planning, and it made me realize we've never really talked about yours. We talked about it at dinner. Not seriously. I thought the questions about my mortgage, pension insurance, and future housing were fairly serious. He looked embarrassed. Ashley came on too strong. I agree. She knows that. Does she? Yes. I waited. Ryan pushed the folder toward me. This is different. I did not touch it. What am I looking at? Basic documents. Emergency planning. Medical authorization. Financial authority if something happens. I already have an advance directive. I know. And medical paperwork. This is broader. There it was. Broader. Ryan pulled out one document. This is a limited power of attorney. I looked at him. For what financial matters? Why, if you were hospitalized or incapacitated, somebody would need to pay bills, deal with insurance, handle the house, that kind of thing. David could help. Ryan frowned. David, I had made a mistake. Not a huge one, but enough. David Lawson. Robert's lawyer, estate lawyer. Ryan studied my face. You're still dealing with him occasionally. About Robert's estate. Yes, that was all I gave him. Ryan tapped the document. A lawyer isn't family. No, I am. I know. Then why would you rather have some attorney dealing with your finances than your son? I didn't say I would. Then read it. I pulled the document toward me. Ryan relaxed slightly. He expected me to skim. I did not skim document. I would. Then read it. I pulled the document toward me. Ryan relaxed slightly. He expected me to skim. I did not skim documents. I had spent 34 years finding errors hidden in paperwork that other people called routine. I began on page 1, then page 2. Ryan drank his coffee. By page 4, he became restless. You don't have to read every word right now. Yes, I do. It's standard. Standard documents still have words. He sighed. I continued. The document did contain limitations, but not the limitations Ryan had implied. The authority extended beyond paying utilities while I was in a hospital. It covered banking transactions, investment accounts, tax matters, certain real estate transactions, the management of property, access to records, communication with financial institutions. I read one section twice. Then I looked up. Who prepared this? Ryan hesitated. A lawyer. I assumed it wasn't the dentist. Mom. What lawyer? Ashley got the referral. Of course she did. Does this lawyer represent me? No. Not exactly. Then whose interest did he consider when drafting a document giving you authority over my finances? Ryan leaned back. You're making this sound sinister. I'm asking a question. It's a template. Then why does a template need to give you authority involving real property, in case something happens to you? What kind of something, if you can't manage things yourself? Who decides that? His jaw tightened. Mom, this is normal planning. Then you won't mind if David reviews it. That changed his expression. Not dramatically. But I saw it. Why does David need to review it? Because he's an attorney. So is the person who prepared it. But that attorney isn't mine. Ryan looked toward the window. This is exactly what Ashley was talking about. What you make everything harder than it needs to be. I felt something inside me go very still. By reading before I sign, no. By assuming we're trying to do something to you. I haven't accused you of anything. You don't have to. Ryan, you arrived without warning and put a document in front of me, giving you financial authority. You described it as something that would let you pay my bills in an emergency. It does considerably more than that, only if necessary. According to whom? He pushed his chair back slightly. You've always trusted me. There it was. Not an explanation. An appeal. A request that I substitute history for scrutiny. I looked at my son. I still love you. His face softened for half a second. Then I finished. That isn't the same thing. Silence filled the kitchen. Ryan stared at me. What does that mean? It means love is not a signature. I never said it was. You're acting as though reading the document is an insult to you, because you're treating me like a stranger. No. I would never let a stranger get this far. He stood. Forget it. Ryan. No. Seriously. Forget it. He began putting the papers back into the folder. I watched him. Why are you so angry? I'm not angry. You're packing like the folder offended you. He stopped. Then he looked directly at me. I'm trying to make sure that if something happens, Ashley and I aren't left cleaning up a mess. A mess. My life. My house. My accounts. Apparently all of it could become a mess for them. I have an estate plan. Do I know what it is? No. Why not? Because you're not the person who made it. His face changed. I'm your only child. I'm aware. So eventually I'm going to have to deal with these things. Eventually is not today. Why are you being like this? Like what? Secretive. That word landed between us. I thought of Silver Creek, the deed in my safe deposit box, the maps in David's office, the Southern Access Corridor, Horizon Ridge, Ashley. I kept my voice calm. What exactly do you think I'm keeping secret? Ryan looked away. Nothing. That wasn't an answer. He zipped the folder. I just think Dad would have wanted me involved. That hurt. Not because I believed him, because he had used Richard. Your father wanted me capable of managing my own life. I didn't say you weren't capable. Then stop asking me to prepare as though I'm already losing that ability. Ryan picked up the folder. You know what? I came here because I care about you. I believe you care about me. He looked surprised. I also believe caring about someone doesn't give you automatic authority over them. He shook his head. Ashley was right. About what you take everything personally. I almost smiled at the absurdity. This is literally my personal financial authority. He did not laugh. Ryan walked toward the front door. I followed. Before he left, I said, "Leave me a copy." He turned. "Why?" "So David can review it." "No point. You've already decided. I've decided not to sign today." "That's the same thing." "No, Ryan, it isn't." But he took the folder with him. I watched him drive away. Only after his car disappeared did I realize my hands were shaking. I went back into the kitchen and sat where he had been sitting. His coffee was still half full. I looked at the chair across from me and tried to understand what had just happened. Maybe Ryan genuinely believed he was helping. I had to allow that possibility. Adult children worried about aging parents every day. Powers of attorney were normal estate planning tools. Nothing about the existence of the document itself proved bad intentions. But timing mattered. The financial questions, the old Bennett papers, Ryan asking about Robert, Ashley working with Horizon Ridge, and now a document broad enough to give Ryan authority involving property. I called David. Something happened. He listened while I explained. When I finished, he asked one question. "Did you sign anything number good?" That sounded more relieved than I wanted it to. I'm a lawyer. Relief is one of our less expensive services. I almost laughed. "David, am I becoming paranoid?" "No. You answered too quickly." "Then let me be precise. I cannot tell you Ryan's intentions. I can tell you that refusing to sign a financial power of attorney without independent legal advice is not paranoia." I looked at the empty chair. Could that document have given him control over Silver Creek? Potentially, depending on the exact language. My stomach tightened. I didn't keep a copy. Then we don't speculate. What do I do? Exactly what you did. Say no. Ask questions. After we hung up, I went upstairs. From the back of my closet, I took out Richard's old wooden box. Inside were photographs, letters, and a few small things I could not bring myself to throw away. I found a photograph of Ryan at 16. Richard stood behind him with both hands on his shoulders. They were laughing. I sat on the edge of my bed holding that picture. "I don't want to distrust him." "Trust him," I whispered. The room gave me no answer. But by then I understood something I had resisted since the wedding. I didn't have to decide whether Ryan was a good son or a bad son. People were more complicated than that. I only had to decide whether signing that document was wise. It wasn't. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath the sadness, I felt grateful for one simple fact. Ryan still did not know I owned Silver Creek. Because if this was how angry he became when I refused to give him authority over assets he thought were modest, I wasn't ready to find out what he would ask for once he discovered what I actually had. For the next 11 days, Ryan did not call me. That might not sound like a long time when your child is 39, married, and busy with a career. But mothers know patterns. Ryan usually called every few days, even if only for 5 minutes from his car. Sometimes he complained about work. Sometimes he asked whether I had watched a football game I had no interest in. Sometimes he simply called because he was stuck in traffic and knew I would answer. After the power of attorney argument, there was nothing. No call, no text. Not even one of the photographs Ashley sometimes sent from restaurants with the message, "You would love this place." I told myself to give him space. By the 4th day, I was irritated. By the 7th, I was hurt. By the 11th, I was angry with myself for counting. That Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee when my phone showed me a social media notification. Ashley had posted photographs. Normally, I would have scrolled past. Instead, I opened them. The first showed Ashley standing beside two professionally dressed men in a glass conference room. The caption said, "Big things coming to Northern Colorado. Grateful to work with people who know how to turn vision into reality." The second photograph showed architectural renderings. The third showed Ashley seated at a conference table. I nearly moved on. Then something in the background caught my attention. A map. I enlarged the photograph. The resolution wasn't perfect, but I recognized the shape immediately. Not because I had become an expert on Colorado geography, Because David Lawson had placed almost the same map in front of me. Horizon Ridge's development parcels appeared on one side. Silver Creek sat on the other. I enlarged it again. A thick line crossed the southern portion. Beside it were 3 words: Silver Creek Access. I stopped breathing for a moment. Ashley was smiling at the camera. Behind her, my ranch was literally part of the plan. I set the phone on the kitchen table. There could still be an innocent explanation. Of course, Horizon Ridge had maps showing Silver Creek. They had approached Robert before his death. They had wanted access for years. Ashley working with the company did not automatically mean she knew I owned the ranch. That distinction mattered. I refused to abandon it merely because I was angry. Still, I saved the photograph. Then I sent it to David. He called 20 minutes later. I saw it. Am I overreacting? No. You keep giving me that answer. Because you keep showing me things worth noticing. Does this prove Ashley knows? No. I appreciated that. What does it prove? That Silver Creek remains central enough to their planning to appear on an internal presentation map? Could that map be old? Possibly. Could they still believe Robert's estate owns it? Possibly. You're not very comforting. You don't pay me for comfort. I'm beginning to understand that. David told me not to contact Horizon Ridge and not to confront Ashley. Wait, he said. For what information? I didn't have to wait long. The following Tuesday, Ryan finally emailed me. The subject line was insurance contact info. The message was short. Mom sending you the information we discussed for our insurance agent. Might be useful whenever you review your own coverage. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. The information had nothing to do with Silver Creek. I almost laughed at myself. Then I noticed the email had been forwarded rather than newly composed. Below Ryan's message was an older chain. Most people would have ignored it. I had spent 34 years looking for things other people ignored. I scrolled. There were several messages between Ryan and Ashley from weeks earlier. The first was about their Crestview house. Then I reached one that made my stomach turn. Ashley had written, "Did your dad or anyone on the Bennett side ever own land north of Fort Collins? HR has an old Bennett name in some preliminary property material." Ryan replied, "Dad never mentioned owning anything significant. Robert Bennett had some kind of ranch. Mom brought old records over. I can look through them. I read it twice. Then again." The date was the day after I had brought Richard's box to their house. Ashley answered, "Don't make it obvious. I'm probably connecting dots that aren't there. But if there's family property involved, it would be useful to know before my next meeting." Ryan replied, "I'll see what I can find." My hands went cold. There was more. 2 days later, Ashley wrote, "Anything." Ryan answered, "Found an old survey. Robert Bennett definitely had land in that area. Dad's name appears in some older family paperwork, but I can't tell whether he had an ownership interest." Ashley, "Then you ask Jordan Ryan, not directly. She'll wonder why." Ashley, "Then don't. Just find out whether anything passed through your dad's estate." I leaned back from the computer. Suddenly, the missing folders were no longer ambiguous. Ryan had not accidentally picked them up while looking for photographs. He had searched them, at Ashley's request. I kept scrolling. The next message was dated before Ryan brought me the power of attorney documents. Ashley had written, "If Robert's property ended up anywhere on your side of the family, we need to understand who has authority. HR is going to push hard once they start formal negotiations." Ryan responded, "Mom would tell me if she owned something like that." Ashley, "Would she?" Ryan, "Yes." Then 15 minutes later, "At least I think she would." I closed my eyes. There are moments when betrayal does not arrive dramatically. Nobody screams. Nobody slams a door. You simply sit at your kitchen table and realize that a person you love has been having conversations about you that you were never meant to see. Ryan had gone through Richard's papers because Ashley asked him to. He had asked me about Robert because Ashley wanted information. And when he later placed a power of attorney in front of me, Ashley already knew Horizon Ridge might need property connected to the Bennett family. I still could not prove that the power of attorney was specifically intended to reach Silver Creek. I reminded myself of that. But the sequence was impossible to ignore. I forwarded the entire email chain to David. Then I called him. This time I didn't ask whether I was overreacting. I sent you something. I'm opening it now. I waited. David was silent for almost a minute. That changes things, he said. How much? It establishes that Ryan was actively investigating Bennett property at Ashley's request, and the power of attorney. It creates a concerning timeline. It does not prove intent. I know. You sound disappointed. I want you to tell me I'm wrong. I can't. I looked toward the window. Richard's maple tree had begun losing leaves. What do I do? Preserve the emails. I already forwarded them. I'll keep copies. You should too. Should I confront Ryan? Not yet. Why? Because right now you know more than they realize you know. That sentence made me uncomfortable. I don't want to play games with my son. Then don't. What do you call this, protecting information, until you understand the situation? I thought about the wedding. Ashley saying I had nothing. Ryan saying nothing. All those questions after the honeymoon, the folders. Robert, Horizon Ridge, the power of attorney. Now the email. For weeks I had been trying to give each event an innocent explanation. Separately I still could. Together they formed something I could no longer pretend not to see. That evening Ryan called. His voice was cheerful. Hey, Mom. I stared at the email on my computer screen. Hello, sweetheart. Did you get that insurance information I did? Good. A pause. Then he said, Sorry I've been quiet. I figured you were busy. Work's been crazy. I understand. He hesitated. We okay? That question almost broke me, because I wanted to say yes. I wanted to go backward, back to before Silver Creek, before Ashley, before I had started wondering whether every question had another purpose. Instead I said I love you. That sounds like a mother answer. It is. Ryan laughed softly. I love you too. For several minutes we talked about ordinary things. Then almost casually he asked, Did you ever find out more about Robert's estate? I looked at the forwarded email. What do you mean you said you were still dealing with his lawyer? Some paperwork. Anything complicated. Why no reason? Just wondering. No reason. Ashley had used those exact words once. I felt something inside me harden, not into cruelty but clarity. Nothing I can't handle, I said. Ryan was quiet. Okay. After we hung up, I remained at the table. I did not feel victorious because I had kept my secret. I felt sad. But sadness and weakness are not the same thing. For the first time, I understood that my silence was giving me something valuable. Time. Time to see what Ryan would do when he believed there was nothing significant to gain from me. Time to understand Horizon Ridge. Time to protect Silver Creek before anyone could pressure me. I opened Ashley's photograph again. There it was. Silver Creek access. A few inches behind my daughter-in-law's smiling face. Then I looked at the email where she had written, If there's family property involved, it would be useful to know. She had been looking. Ryan had been helping her. And now I knew. The only thing they still didn't know was that they were looking for land that already belonged to me. Ryan found out about Silver Creek on a Wednesday morning. I know because at 10:17 my phone began ringing. At 10:18 it rang again. At 10:20 he sent a text. Mom, call me. At 10:22, this is important. At 10:24, why is your name on Silver Creek Ranch? I was standing in the produce aisle of a grocery store when I read it. For weeks I had known this moment would come. Property ownership is not the kind of secret you can keep forever. David had warned me that public records would eventually connect my name to Silver Creek. Still seeing Ryan write those words made my stomach tighten. I did not call him from the grocery store. I finished shopping. I drove home. I put the milk in the refrigerator, the vegetables in the drawer, and the coffee in the cabinet. Only then did I sit at my kitchen table and call my son. He answered before the first ring finished. Mom. Hello, Ryan. Is it true what Silver Creek? I waited. Is what true? Don't do that. His voice was sharper than I expected. Your name is on the property records. Yes. Silence. Then you own it. Yes. All of it I inherited Robert's interest. Another silence. How long since before your wedding? He exhaled hard. You knew at the wedding, yes. And you didn't tell me no. The anger in his voice surprised me. Not shock, not curiosity. Anger. Why? Because it was private. I'm your son. I know. How do you inherit 1,800 acres and not mention it to your only child, 1,850? I shouldn't have corrected him. But Richard would have. Ryan gave a short, humorless laugh. So you know exactly what you own. I've made an effort to learn, apparently. I looked through the window toward the maple tree. Ryan, how did you find out? That's not the point. It is to me. Public records. Were you searching public records for my name? He hesitated. That hesitation answered me. Ryan Ashley's team updated some ownership research. There it was. So Ashley knows. Yes. How long since this morning? I doubted that was the entire truth, but I didn't challenge it. Ryan continued. Mom, do you understand what Silver Creek is worth? I understand more than I did. Then why would you hide something like this? I didn't hide it. I didn't announce it. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. You let us sit there talking about your finances like you had nothing. I felt a small flash of anger. You mean when Ashley asked about my mortgage pension, Social Security insurance, and whether I should move into senior living? That's not fair. It's exactly what happened. She was trying to help, and I answered the questions I wanted to answer. Ryan went quiet. Then he said, You made us look stupid. I almost asked who us meant. Instead, I said I didn't tell anyone you were stupid. You knew Ashley was working with Horizon Ridge. Eventually. And you still said nothing. Yes. Why? Because I had seen the map. Because I had read the emails. Because I knew he had searched Richard's papers. Because he had brought me a power of attorney after Ashley asked him to determine who controlled Bennett family property. But I wasn't ready to show him everything I knew. I wanted to understand the ranch before discussing it. I could have helped. With what? With the business side. I have an attorney. David Lawson. Yes. Ryan made a frustrated sound. That guy is going to convince you to sit on a property worth millions because some 80-year-old rancher was sentimental. That was the first moment I became genuinely angry. Robert was not a fool. I didn't say he was. You called him sentimental as though that makes his decisions irrational. Mom, Horizon Ridge is talking about serious money. How serious? Ryan stopped. I waited. How serious? Ryan, you should talk to Ashley. Why? Because she understands the project. So do her clients. Exactly. I leaned back. Ryan, are you calling me as my son, or as someone connected to Horizon Ridge? That's ridiculous. Then answer as my son. Why are you angry that I own a ranch? I'm not angry you own it. You sound angry. I'm angry you didn't trust me enough to tell me. That hurt because there was truth inside it. Once I would have told him, before the wedding, before the questions, before the papers, before the emails. I needed time, I said. To do what? To watch. He went quiet. What does that mean? Exactly what I said. Watch who I didn't answer. Ryan's voice hardened. You think Ashley married me for money? I didn't say that. You think we're trying to take something from you? I didn't say that either. Then what are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you I had a major financial decision placed in my hands shortly before your wedding, and I chose not to announce it. Ryan breathed heavily into the phone. Finally, he said, We need to talk in person. I agree. He arrived that evening. Ashley came with him. That did not surprise me. What surprised me was Ashley's transformation. She entered carrying flowers, not supermarket flowers. An enormous arrangement of white roses and greenery that looked expensive enough to require financing. These are for you, she said. I looked at the flowers. What happened? She laughed. Nothing. You've never brought me flowers before. Her smile faltered for half a second. I should have. Ryan gave me a warning look. I took them. Thank you. We sat in the living room. Ashley leaned toward me. Jordan, I owe you an apology. For what? For the way I talked about your finances. That was unexpected. I was intrusive. Yes. She blinked. Perhaps she expected me to rescue her from the admission. I didn't. I deal with financial details every day, she continued, and sometimes I forget. Other people don't live that way. I understand. I also understand why you kept Silver Creek private. Ryan turned toward her. You do? She touched his arm. Ryan, it was her inheritance. Her inheritance. Interesting. At the wedding, I had been a future financial burden. Now I was a woman whose privacy deserved respect. Ashley smiled at me. And honestly, I think it's incredible. What is that ranch staying in the family? I nearly laughed. Your family? She looked slightly embarrassed. The Bennett family. I mean our family now. Our family. Another new phrase. Ashley continued. Silver Creek is a legacy property. Have you been there? No. Then how do you know? I've seen the materials. Of course she had. Maps, reports, planning documents. Through Horizon Ridge. She nodded. Ryan leaned forward. Mom, nobody is trying to pressure you. Good. We just want you to understand the opportunity. What opportunity? Ashley answered. Horizon Ridge has been interested in Silver Creek for years. I know. That surprised her. You do? Robert kept records. Not entirely true, but close enough. Ashley recovered quickly. Then you know they're serious. I know they want something. They want to negotiate. For the ranch, not necessarily all of it. There was the distinction David had taught me to expect. They're primarily interested in certain rights and portions of the southern property. Access. Ashley's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, water. Another pause. Yes, easements. This time she looked directly at Ryan, then back at me. You've done your homework. I own the property. That seemed sensible. Ryan smiled, but there was tension in it. See, this is why we should all sit down together. All you, me, Ashley, Horizon Ridge. I looked at him. Why are you in that meeting? Because I'm your son. That doesn't make you part of a real estate transaction. Ashley quickly intervened. Jordan, I think Ryan means you shouldn't have to navigate something this large alone. I'm not alone. David. Yes. Ashley smiled carefully. David's an estate lawyer. He also knows the property. Horizon Ridge has specialists who can explain the development side. I'm sure they do. Ryan leaned forward. Mom, this could change all our lives. There it was. Not your life. Our lives. How Ryan seemed surprised by the question. You could have more money than you ever imagined. And what would you have? His face tightened. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Ashley stepped in again. He means financial freedom for the family. I looked around the room. My paid-for furniture, my comfortable house, my retirement, my health, my ability to wake up and decide what to do with my day. I already feel fairly free. Ryan rubbed his forehead. Why are you fighting this before you've even heard an offer? I'm not fighting anything. You sound like you've already decided not to sell. I haven't received an offer. Ashley leaned closer. Then let them make one. Her voice had changed. It was softer, professional, persuasive. I finally saw the real estate agent my son had married. What do you think they'll offer? I asked. She hesitated. I shouldn't speculate. Millions? Yes. How many? It depends on the structure. 5. She said nothing. 10. Ryan looked at Ashley. Her silence told me I was getting closer to something. I smiled. You came here tonight because this isn't about a few $100,000. Ryan stood and walked toward the fireplace. No one said it was. Ashley remained seated. Jordan, there is potentially a very significant transaction here. And your compensation. Ryan turned. Mom. What? Ashley's face became carefully neutral. I would be compensated for my professional role. How? That depends on the final structure. So if I agree to something with Horizon Ridge, you benefit. Yes. I appreciated that, she answered. And Ryan? He's my husband. So he benefits when you benefit. Ryan shook his head. This is exactly why we didn't want to talk numbers before you understood the project. I looked at him. You didn't want to talk numbers. He realized his mistake. Ashley looked at him too. The room went silent. Before. That word mattered. Before I understood the project. Before I knew they knew. Before today. Ryan tried to recover. I mean before tonight. I didn't challenge him. Not yet. Instead I said I'll meet Horizon Ridge. Ashley visibly relaxed. Ryan turned toward me. You will? Yes. Ashley smiled. I think that's smart. I'll listen. That's all anyone is asking. And David comes with me. Her smile weakened. Of course. I choose the meeting place. Fine. And I sign nothing. Ryan sighed. Nobody expects you to sign on the spot. Good. Ashley stood and hugged me before leaving. This time the embrace lasted longer than usual. We really do want what's best for you, she whispered. I looked over her shoulder at my son. I hope so. After they left, I carried the white roses into the kitchen. They were beautiful. I placed them beside the window. Then I sat at the table and called David. They know. I assumed that call was coming soon. Horizon Ridge wants a meeting. Do you? Yes. Why I looked at the flowers Ashley had never thought to bring me before she knew I owned Silver Creek. Because I want to hear exactly how much my family legacy is worth to people who only started calling it that after they discovered the price. David was quiet. Then he said, I'll arrange it. I looked again at those white roses. They had arrived the same day my secret disappeared. And somehow that told me almost as much as any offer could. The meeting with Horizon Ridge took place 9 days later. I chose David Lawson's office. Ashley had suggested a private dining room at an upscale hotel in Denver. Ryan thought neutral territory would make everyone more comfortable. I disagreed. I wasn't interested in being comfortable. I was interested in understanding what people wanted from me. David's conference room had no champagne, no expensive lunch, and no panoramic view of the mountains. It had a rectangular table, legal pads, water glasses, and enough fluorescent light to make everyone look honest. That suited me. I arrived 20 minutes early. David was already there. You nervous? He asked. No. He raised an eyebrow. Yes, I admitted. But I don't intend to show it. That's usually the better strategy. He had arranged copies of Silver Creek maps in front of us. Remember, he said you don't owe anyone an answer today. I know. You don't even owe them a future answer. I know. And if you want the meeting to end, we end it. I smiled. David, I kept books for agricultural suppliers. I spent half my life listening to salesmen explain why invoices were higher than their purchase orders. That sounds like useful training. You have no idea. At 10 precisely, the Horizon Ridge representatives arrived. There were 3 of them. The senior man introduced himself as Charles Whitmore, Vice President of Acquisitions. Beside him was Melissa Grant, an attorney representing Horizon Ridge, and a younger development planner named Kevin Brooks. Ashley arrived with them. Ryan came separately. That bothered me. Why is Ryan here? I quietly asked David. He said you invited him. I did not. David looked toward my son. Would you like me to ask him to leave? I considered it. Then I shook my head. No, let him here. Ryan smiled when he saw me. Mom. Ryan. Ashley came over and touched my arm. Thank you for doing this. I'm listening, that's all. Of course. We sat. Charles began with the kind of polished friendliness I associated with people who negotiated for a living. Mrs. Bennett, first I want to say how much we appreciate your time. Jordan is fine. Jordan, thank you. He spoke about Horizon Ridge's vision for northern Colorado. Responsible growth, thoughtful planning, open space, community, infrastructure, jobs, economic opportunity. I listened. Some of it sounded reasonable. Growth wasn't evil. People needed places to live. Communities changed. I had no intention of turning Robert's stubbornness into a religion merely because I had inherited his ranch. Then Kevin unfolded a large rendering. The proposed development was impressive. Homes clustered around landscaped green spaces, walking trails, a community center, small commercial areas, road connections. Beautiful, I said. Ashley smiled. I told you. But it isn't on Silver Creek. Charles nodded. Not primarily. Primarily. I looked at David. He wrote something on his legal pad. Charles continued. Our primary development acreage lies east and southeast of your property. Then why am I here? A brief silence. Melissa the attorney answered. Because certain rights associated with Silver Creek could significantly improve the project. Access. Yes. Water. Yes. Easements. She smiled slightly. You've clearly familiarized yourself with the issues. I own them. It seemed responsible. Across the table, Ryan shifted in his chair. Charles pulled a document forward. What we're proposing is not necessarily the acquisition of the entire ranch. Not necessarily we're flexible. I waited. He explained the structure. Horizon Ridge wanted a defined portion of the southern property, permanent access through the corridor David had shown me, modifications to existing easements, and a substantial package involving Silver Creek's water rights. They presented it as a way for me to retain most of the ranch while unlocking extraordinary value. That phrase caught my attention. Unlocking value. As if the value were trapped until they could use it. What happens to the cattle operation, I asked. Kevin answered. We believe ranching can continue on much of the remaining acreage. Much there would be adjustments. What kind? Some fencing relocation. Potential changes to grazing patterns. Construction staging during development. For how long? That depends on the construction schedule. 5 years possibly. 10 potentially in phases. I looked at Sam's map in my mind. The peaceful southern pasture, the creek, the old road. What about water? Melissa answered this time. The transaction would include permanent transfer and restructuring of specified rights. Permanent. Yes. So if I agree, I don't get those rights back when your project is finished. No. And whoever owns Silver Creek after me doesn't get them back. No. Ryan leaned forward. Mom listened to the whole thing. I turned toward him. I am. Charles opened another folder. We understand permanent rights require permanent value. Finally. The number. He slid a document across the table. David pulled it toward us before I touched it. His eyes moved down the first page. Then he looked at me. He didn't react. That told me I should. How much? I asked. Charles answered. $22 million. For a moment I heard nothing. 22 million. Richard and I had spent our entire marriage thinking carefully before replacing a refrigerator. I had once driven to 3 stores to save $40 on a dishwasher. Now a man across the table had said $22 million as calmly as if he were offering me another cup of coffee. Ryan was watching me. Ashley was watching me. Everyone was. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. 22 million for what you've described. Yes, Charles said. Not the entire ranch. Correct. Ryan smiled. Mom, do you understand? I looked at him. Yes. I still understand numbers. His smile disappeared. Ashley leaned forward. Jordan, this is an extraordinary offer. It sounds like one. You could invest it conservatively and never think about money again. I don't think about money very often now. Ryan exhaled. Mom, what $22 million? I heard him. He looked genuinely unable to understand my calmness. Dad worked his whole life and never saw money like that. Your father saw plenty of numbers. Not 22 million. I thought about Richard's warning. Enough zeros on a check. So this was what Robert had faced. Not cattle versus development. Not old land versus new houses. Zeros. Enough of them to make refusal look irrational. I turned to Charles. Why is it worth 22 million to you? He smiled. Because the rights have strategic value. That's a polished answer. It's an accurate one. If I say no, what happens? Ashley glanced at Charles. He answered carefully. We pursue alternatives. How expensive are those alternatives? That depends. More than 22 million. No one answered immediately. That was an answer. David spoke for the first time in several minutes. We'll need full documentation regarding the valuation assumptions proposed, water transfer corridor rights, easement modifications, and any continuing obligations affecting Silver Creek. Melissa nodded. We can provide that. I looked at the offer again. Does this give Horizon Ridge permanent control of the access corridor, Under the proposed structure, yes. And the water rights listed here are permanently transferred, yes. Could Silver Creek continue operating exactly as it does today? Kevin shifted. Exactly is difficult to guarantee. Then no. Ryan stared at me. What I said no. Charles remained calm. We don't expect an immediate decision. I'm giving you one. Ashley leaned forward. Jordan, please don't do this emotionally. That irritated me. You think saying yes to 22 million would be logical, but saying no must be emotional. I'm saying you need time. I've had time. Ryan pushed his chair back. This is insane. Ryan. No, Mom. $22 million. It isn't your money. The room became very quiet. His face reddened. I know that. Then stop reacting as if I just took it away from you. Ashley whispered his name. Ryan stood. You're throwing away our future. There it was. The sentence that finally stripped everything else away. Not your future. Our future. I looked up at my son. Whose future, Ryan? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I waited. Still nothing. Charles looked uncomfortable. Ashley looked furious, not at me, I realized, but at Ryan for saying too much. I stood. Thank you for the presentation. Charles rose too. Jordan, our offer remains open. David will communicate with you if necessary. Ashley followed me toward the door. Can we talk privately? Not today. Jordan, please. I turned. Her voice dropped. You don't understand what this could do for everyone. That may be the problem. What does that mean? Everyone keeps telling me what $22 million could do. I looked back at the maps. Nobody has asked what giving up those rights would do to Silver Creek. Her expression changed. Just slightly. But enough. I walked out. Ryan caught me near the elevator. Mom. I pressed the button. Not now. You embarrassed us. I turned. I declined an offer for my property. You made Ashley look like she brought a client into a pointless meeting. I listened. You didn't negotiate. I don't have to negotiate something I don't want to sell. The elevator arrived. Ryan blocked the door for a moment. This isn't just about you. I looked at my son. Yes, Ryan. Legally it is. His face hardened. Dad would have taken that deal. That was the cruelest thing he could have said. For a second it worked. Then I remembered David telling me exactly what Richard had said. Jordan won't sell something just because somebody puts enough zeros on a check. I stepped into the elevator. No, I said quietly. Your father knew me better than that. The doors closed between us. On the drive home, I expected to feel powerful. I didn't. I felt exhausted. $22 million was more money than I could comfortably imagine. Maybe another person would have taken it. Maybe someday I would question whether I had been foolish. But I knew what I had heard in that room. Ryan had not said, "You're throwing away your future." He had said, "Our future." Somewhere along the way, my son had begun building tomorrow with money that belonged to me today. And that frightened me far more than turning down $22 million ever could. Ryan did not speak to me for 17 days after the Horizon Ridge meeting. This time I didn't count because I was waiting for him to call. I counted because every morning I wondered whether that would be the day my son remembered I was his mother, instead of the woman who had refused $22 million. On the third day, Ashley sent me a message. I hope when emotions settle we can revisit the conversation. I read it twice. Not when everyone has more information. Not when we understand each other better. When emotions settle. Apparently my decision was still being treated as an emotional episode. I did not respond. On the sixth day, Ryan finally sent a text. I hope you're happy with your decision. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I typed, I hope someday you understand it. I deleted that. Then I typed, I love you. I deleted that too. In the end, I sent nothing. Love did not require me to chase someone who was punishing me with silence. That was a lesson I had learned late in life. Maybe too late. I spent more time at Silver Creek. Sam never asked about the $22 million offer until I told him. We were standing beside the equipment barn when I mentioned it. He stopped walking. 22. Yes. Million. I assumed you knew what kind of dollars I meant. He whistled. Robert would have enjoyed that. Why? He liked making rich people confused. I laughed. What would he have done? Probably asked them to fix the north fence before he said no. That fence is terrible. Exactly. We walked toward the pasture. Sam became serious. You okay? Yes. That sounded fake. I looked at him. I turned down more money than Richard and I earned in our entire lives. That bothering you, no. What is my son thinks I stole it from him? Sam nodded slowly. Ah, that's all you have, family and land. Two subjects smart people learn not to give advice about unless asked. I'm asking. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. Then I'd say money you never had can't be stolen from you. I looked towards the cattle. I wish Ryan understood that. Maybe he will. Maybe. I wasn't sure anymore. 2 days later, David called. His voice told me immediately that something had happened. Are you home? Yes. Can you come to my office? When today? What happened? I'd rather show you. My stomach tightened. Is Silver Creek in danger? No. Then tell me. He hesitated. I found something in Horizon Ridge's county materials. I was in his office 90 minutes later. David had a laptop open and several printed documents on the conference table. What am I looking at? A preliminary development submission. Horizon Ridge. Yes. I thought they were still negotiating. They are. But large projects often move through multiple processes at once. He turned the laptop toward me. A site plan filled the screen. I recognized the development area. Then I saw a line crossing the southern edge of Silver Creek. Proposed primary access. I leaned closer. They submitted this before I agreed yes. When David pointed to the filing date, it was weeks before our $22 million meeting. I stared at him. They assumed I would sell. That appears to be part of their planning assumption. Can they do that? They can submit concepts based on anticipated acquisitions. That alone isn't necessarily improper. Then why am I here? David slid a printed page toward me. Read this section. I did. Most of it was planning language. Then I found the phrase. Property access negotiations are progressing through a family ownership connection associated with Silver Creek Ranch. I read it again. What family ownership connection? That's what concerned me. There is no family ownership connection. You are the sole owner. Exactly. David nodded. Keep reading. Another section identified project consultants. I saw Ashley Bennett's name, transaction consultant. That didn't surprise me. Then in supporting notes I found another reference. Local family liaison, Ryan Bennett. I felt as though someone had pressed a hand against my chest. What is a local family liaison? It isn't a legal ownership designation. What does it mean? In this context, very little formally. Then why is his name there? David looked at me. Because someone represented him as having a useful family connection to the property. I sat back. No, Jordan. He doesn't own anything. I know. He doesn't represent me. I know. He has no authority. I know. Then why would Horizon Ridge put his name in their materials? David remained quiet. Because we both knew the likely answer. Ryan had allowed them to believe he could influence me. Maybe he had done more than allow it. Do you think he promised them I would sell? I don't know. Could Ashley have done it without him knowing? Possibly. I hated that word. Possibly. It preserved hope while making no promises. David opened another document. There's more. I almost laughed. Of course there is. This came from correspondence attached to an earlier planning memorandum. He pointed to a paragraph. The language was cautious, but the meaning was not. The project team anticipated favorable resolution of Silver Creek access because the current ownership was described as family aligned with the expectation that internal discussions would facilitate the necessary transaction. Internal discussions. I thought about my kitchen, Ryan sitting across from me with the leather folder. The power of attorney. You've always trusted me. My mouth went dry. David. Yes. Was that written? Ryan brought me the power of attorney. David checked the date. Yes. I closed my eyes. That did not prove Ryan had brought the document specifically for Horizon Ridge. I knew that. David knew that. But the timing no longer felt innocent. Ashley had already asked him to investigate Bennett property. Horizon Ridge already believed a family connection could help secure access. Then Ryan had asked me to sign broad financial authority. I opened my eyes. I want to see everything. David nodded. For the next hour, we reviewed the materials. There was no forged signature, no fake deed, no document claiming Ryan owned Silver Creek. In a strange way, I was grateful. My son had not crossed that line. But what he had done was painful enough. He had allowed his relationship with me to become part of a business strategy. At some point, Horizon Ridge had been led to believe that Ryan Bennett could help deliver cooperation from the owner of Silver Creek Ranch. Me. Not because he was my agent, not because he had legal authority, because he was my son. I felt sick. Can this hurt the ranch? Not if we respond appropriately. What does that mean? The county process will eventually require clarification of access rights and ownership consent when there's a public hearing scheduled next month regarding preliminary project approvals. Will Silver Creek come up? Almost certainly. I stared at the map. What happens if I do nothing? Horizon Ridge may continue pursuing alternative arrangements while hoping you reconsider. And if the county believes they already have my cooperation, we correct the record. How? David folded his hands. You can submit written clarification. Will that be enough? Legally, perhaps. Strategically, I would prefer something stronger. What if Silver Creek's rights become a central issue at the hearing you attend? I looked at him. You want me to stand up publicly against my son? I want the owner of Silver Creek to state the truth. That sounds cleaner when you say it. I know. I stood and walked toward the window. Below us, cars moved through downtown Fort Collins. People going to lunch, going to work, living ordinary lives. I wanted my ordinary life back. I wanted Richard at my kitchen table. I wanted Ryan at 14 holding a fishing pole. I wanted to believe Ashley's worst quality was simply being too interested in money. Instead, I had a county document calling my son a family liaison to property he did not own. Maybe I should call him, I said. You can. Ask him directly. You can. Would you? David considered it. As your attorney, I'd tell you to preserve your position first. And as a person, I'd want to know whether my son told the truth when he had the opportunity. That was exactly what I wanted. I called Ryan from David's conference room. He answered on the fourth ring. Mom. Ryan, I need to ask you something. He sighed. If this is about the offer, it isn't. Silence. Did you tell Horizon Ridge you could get me to cooperate on Silver Creek? The silence changed. Not confusion. Recognition. Where did you hear that? That isn't an answer. Mom, these development processes are complicated. So is that a yes/no? Then why are you listed in their materials as a family liaison? Another silence. Ashley probably used my name because I'm your son. Did you know I knew they were aware of the connection? Did you tell them I would sell? No. Did you tell them I was likely to sell? Not exactly. My heart sank. What does not exactly mean? Ryan exhaled. I said once you understood the numbers, I thought you'd be reasonable. Reasonable. $22 million had apparently become the definition of reason. And when did you tell them that? I don't remember. Before you asked me to sign the power of attorney. Mom, don't start. That was enough. Ryan, answer me. That document had nothing to do with Horizon Ridge. Then why did Ashley arrange it after asking you to find out who controlled Bennett property? Silence, this time a long one. Finally he said, you read my emails, you forwarded them to me. His voice hardened. That was private. The irony nearly took my breath away. So were Richard's folders. He said nothing. So were my finances. Nothing. So was my inheritance. Mom. You searched your father's records because Ashley asked you to. I was trying to understand what was going on. No. You were trying to understand what I owned, because nobody tells me anything. There it was. Anger, entitlement, and underneath both perhaps hurt. I'm your son, he continued. Do you understand how humiliating it was to find out from Ashley's client that my own mother owned property worth millions? I am sorry you were embarrassed. That's not an apology. No, it isn't. He went quiet. I lowered my voice. Ryan, I love you, but you had no right to let strangers believe you could speak for me. I was trying to help. Who? He didn't answer. Me. Silence. Ashley. Still nothing. Yourself. That's unfair. Then tell me who. His voice became cold. You've already decided what kind of person I am. No, Ryan. I'm trying very hard not to. I meant it. That was the tragedy. I still wanted an explanation that would let me see my son the way I had before. But he didn't give me one. Instead, he said, "Do whatever you want with the ranch." Then he hung up. I lowered the phone. David said nothing. For a while, neither did I. Finally, I looked at the county hearing notice. When is it? 4 weeks from Thursday? I nodded. I'll be there. David studied me. Are you sure? No. That was the truth. But I'm done letting other people describe my intentions for me. I gathered the documents. I wasn't going to attack Ryan. I wasn't going to humiliate Ashley. I wasn't going to destroy Horizon Ridge. I would do something much simpler. I would tell the truth. Silver Creek belonged to me. I had promised nothing. I had authorized no one. And if the truth caused consequences for the people who had built plans around my silence, those consequences would belong to them, not me. The morning of the county hearing, I changed my blouse 3 times. That embarrassed me. I was 68 years old. I had buried my husband, learned to live alone, inherited 1,850 acres. I had never expected to own, and turned down $22 million without fainting. Yet there I was, standing in front of my bedroom mirror, wondering whether navy blue made me look too severe. Eventually, I chose a simple cream blouse, dark slacks, and the navy jacket Richard always said made me look like I was about to audit somebody. I smiled when I remembered that. Maybe that's appropriate, I whispered. David met me outside the county administration building shortly before 9. You all right? He asked. No. Good. I looked at him. Good people who say they're completely calm before public hearings usually haven't understood the stakes. That's comforting. It wasn't intended to be. The parking lot was fuller than I expected. Horizon Ridge's proposed development had attracted local residents, property owners, reporters, planning consultants, environmental advocates, and people who seemed to attend county hearings simply because they enjoyed county hearings. Inside, rows of chairs faced a raised dais where commissioners would eventually sit. Large presentation boards stood along one wall, and there, printed on one of them, was Silver Creek. Not by name in large letters, but I recognized the southern boundary immediately. The proposed access route cut across it like somebody had already decided the land would cooperate. David noticed where I was looking. Remember, he said quietly, a planning map is not a deed. I know. Good. Then I saw Ryan. He was standing near the front with Ashley. She wore a charcoal suit and held a thick presentation binder. Ryan wore a dark jacket and looked as though he hadn't slept well. Ashley noticed me first. Her expression froze. She leaned toward Ryan. He turned. For a few seconds, my son and I simply looked at each other across the room. He did not come over. Neither did I. That hurt more than I expected. David and I took seats several rows behind the Horizon Ridge team. At 9:30, the hearing began. There were procedural matters first. Minutes. Agenda items. A zoning issue unrelated to us. I tried to listen. Mostly I watched the back of Ryan's head. When Horizon Ridge was finally called, Charles Whitmore approached the podium. He looked exactly as he had in David's conference room. Calm, prepared, certain. He described Horizon Ridge's project as a thoughtful response to regional housing demand. Kevin Brooks presented maps. Traffic improvements. Open space. Infrastructure. Water planning. Projected tax revenue. Economic benefits. If I hadn't known anything else, I might have been impressed. Then the access map appeared on the screen. Silver Creek. My stomach tightened. Kevin pointed to the southern corridor. This proposed connection provides the most efficient route to the existing county road network. One commissioner interrupted. Is that corridor under applicant ownership? Kevin paused. Not currently. Under contract, another pause. Negotiations have been ongoing. David leaned toward me. Here it comes. The commissioner looked down at her materials. Our staff notes refer to anticipated cooperation through a family ownership relationship. Can you clarify? Charles stepped forward. There have been discussions involving individuals connected to the ownership family. My hands became cold. Not technically a lie. Not remotely the full truth. Another commissioner asked, do you have executed access rights? Melissa Grant, Horizon Ridge's attorney, answered, not at this time. Then why is the access shown as primary? We believe acquisition remains feasible. A staff planner spoke next. Our concern is that several transportation assumptions depend on this corridor. If it is not available, portions of the traffic analysis may need revision. The room shifted. People began whispering. Charles remained composed. We understand that. Then the water discussion began. That was more complicated. Engineers spoke in language that made me grateful David had spent hours explaining the basics. Again, Silver Creek appeared. Again, the project relied partly on rights Horizon Ridge did not own. One commissioner finally asked the question I had been waiting for. Has the current owner of Silver Creek Ranch submitted written consent to any of these proposed transfers? Melissa looked toward Charles. Charles looked toward Ashley. Ashley's shoulders tightened. No, Melissa said. Is the owner present? David looked at me. I stood. The sound in the room seemed to disappear. Yes, I said. Heads turned. Ryan turned too. For the first time that morning, I saw his face clearly. He looked frightened. Not angry. Frightened. David and I walked toward the front. The chairperson asked me to identify myself. My name is Jordan Bennett, and your relationship to Silver Creek Ranch, I am the owner. A murmur moved through the room. The chairperson waited for quiet. Ms. Bennett, would you like to address the commission? Yes. David had prepared a statement for me. It was in my folder. I did not open it. I walked to this microphone. My legs felt unsteady. My voice did not. I want to clarify several things because I believe assumptions have been made about my property. I saw Ashley staring at me. Ryan looked down. Silver Creek Ranch belongs to me. I inherited it from Robert Bennett. I am the sole owner of the interests relevant to the discussions you've heard today. One commissioner nodded. Have you agreed to sell the access corridor, num? Have you signed an option or letter of intent, num? Have you agreed to transfer the water rights identified in the applicant's materials, num? Have you authorized negotiations on your behalf? Num. Staff number. The commissioner looked at the project team, then back at me. Has anyone in your family been authorized to represent you? This was the moment I had dreaded. I could soften it. I could say there had been confusion. I could protect Ryan from embarrassment. For nearly 40 years, protecting him had been instinct. But protecting your child from consequences is not always the same as loving him. No, I said. Ryan closed his eyes. I continued. My son Ryan Bennett does not own Silver Creek Ranch. He has never held ownership authority over it. He does not have power of attorney over my finances or real property, and I have never authorized him to promise or imply that I would approve a transaction. The room was silent. I did not look at Ryan. The chairperson asked, have you received an offer from Horizon Ridge? Yes. Did you accept it? No. Are negotiations continuing? Not from my perspective. Charles shifted in his seat. Ashley whispered something to Melissa. Another commissioner leaned toward his microphone. Ms. Bennett, are you categorically saying the corridor will never be available? David had prepared me for that question. I'm saying it is not available under any agreement that currently exists, and nobody should build a public approval process around an assumption that I have consented when I have not. David gave the smallest nod. The commissioner thanked me. I could have sat down. Instead, I added one thing. I'm not here because I oppose development. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here because my property has appeared in plans as though my decision were a formality. I looked toward the map. It isn't. Then I returned to my seat. The hearing changed after that. Not dramatically. No commissioner pounded a desk. No one accused Horizon Ridge of wrongdoing. Real life rarely gives you scenes that clean. Instead, questions became more skeptical. Transportation assumptions were challenged. Water planning was questioned. Staff members discussed alternative access routes. Costs would need to be recalculated. Parts of the proposal might require revision. The commission did not kill the entire project. They did something more damaging to Horizon Ridge's immediate plans. They delayed action and requested revised materials that did not assume rights the developer had not secured. When the hearing adjourned, the room erupted into conversations. David touched my elbow. You did well. I feel sick. That's normal. I thought lawyers weren't supposed to diagnose people. That one was free. We were almost at the exit when Ashley caught us. Jordan. I turned. Her face was pale. You could have told me you were going to do that. I told you I hadn't agreed. You made it sound like we misrepresented you. Did you? Her mouth tightened. We believed Ryan could help facilitate a family conversation. Did I tell you that? No. Did David know? Then who did? She glanced toward Ryan. That was enough. Ryan was standing 20 feet away. I walked toward him. David stayed behind. Ryan. He looked at me. You humiliated me. His voice was quiet. That made it hurt more. I told the truth. You could have called me first. I did. He looked away. You asked whether I had represented you, and you said you told them I would probably be reasonable after seeing the numbers. I was trying to help everybody. There's that word again. What word, everybody? His eyes flashed. You know what? Fine. Keep the ranch. Keep every acre. Keep every dollar. This was never about keeping money from you. It sure feels like it. No, Ryan. It feels like I refused to give you something you had already started counting. He stared at me. For a second I saw anger, then shame, then something that looked almost like grief. I thought you'd say yes, he whispered. To the offer? He nodded. Why? Because who says no to $22 million, Robert did. That's different. Why, he was old. I almost smiled. So am I, according to Ashley's retirement brochures. Ryan flinched. I regretted the cruelty immediately, but I did not take it back. He rubbed his face. Ashley could lose Horizon Ridge over this. I didn't hire her. They trusted her because she said she had a connection. To you. Yes. Not to me. He looked at the floor. And there it was. The truth in its simplest form. Ashley had a connection to Ryan. Ryan had a connection to me. Somewhere along the way, they had mistaken connection for control. I reached for his hand. He pulled away. That hurt. I love you, I said. He looked at me with wet eyes. Then why does it feel like you chose a ranch over your son? I swallowed. Because you keep asking me to prove I love you by giving up something that was never yours. He had no answer. Neither did I. Ryan walked away. I watched him join Ashley near the elevators. They stood close but did not touch. For the first time I saw how much damage this had done to their marriage, too. Outside, the Colorado afternoon was bright and cold. I stood on the courthouse steps beside David. There was no satisfaction, no revenge, no victory. Only relief that the truth was finally outside my body, where I no longer had to carry it alone. Silver Creek was still mine. Horizon Ridge would have to redesign its assumptions. Ashley would have to explain promises she could not deliver. Ryan would have to face what he had allowed people to believe. I had not created those consequences. I had simply stopped protecting everyone from the truth. And as painful as that was, I was beginning to understand something Richard had known long before I did. Sometimes telling the truth is not what breaks a family. Sometimes the truth only reveals the cracks that were already there. For nearly 2 months after the county hearing, Ryan and I barely spoke. There were no dramatic confrontations, no angry messages, no family members taking sides, just silence. I discovered silence between a mother and her adult child is different from ordinary loneliness. Ordinary loneliness leaves an empty chair. This kind leaves a chair you know someone could sit in if pride hurt and disappointment weren't standing between you. Horizon Ridge did not disappear. David explained that companies with that much money rarely abandon projects after one setback. Instead, they revised. Their engineers began studying alternative access routes. Their attorneys adjusted the application. Their water consultants started looking at options that did not depend on Silver Creek. All of that would cost them time and money. But it was their problem now. Ashley's situation was different. About 3 weeks after the hearing, I heard from Ryan, not because he called me, but because David had learned through professional contacts that Horizon Ridge had removed Ashley from the Silver Creek-related portion of the transaction. They had not fired her from every professional relationship. Her real estate license was intact. Her career wasn't destroyed, but she had lost the largest opportunity she had ever handled. The company apparently believed she had overstated how useful her family connection would be. When David told me, I felt no satisfaction. Is that terrible? I asked. What? That I don't feel sorry for her. You don't have to manufacture emotions. I don't feel happy either. That's probably healthier. I thought about the flowers Ashley had brought me after discovering I owned Silver Creek. I wondered whether she had ever realized how transparent that gesture had become. Then I wondered whether I was being unfair. Ashley was ambitious. Ambition wasn't a crime. She had seen a business opportunity and believed Ryan could help. The deeper betrayal had always been Ryan's. He knew me. He knew how much Richard's memory mattered. He knew I trusted him, and he had used that trust as something negotiable. Still, he was my son. That fact did not disappear simply because I was disappointed in him. Thanksgiving came and went. Ryan spent it with Ashley's family. He sent me a text at 9 that morning. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." I stared at it for several minutes before replying. "Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. I love you." He did not respond. I ate dinner at Silver Creek with Sam and 2 ranch employees who had nowhere else to go. It was one of the strangest Thanksgivings of my life, and one of the most peaceful. A week later, David called. I found something in Robert's personal estate file. What a letter. From Robert? No. There was something in his voice. From Richard. I sat down. What do you mean Richard wrote it several years ago? Robert kept it. Why, I think you should read it. My heart began beating harder. Can you send it? I'd rather give you the original. 2 days later, I drove to David's office. The envelope was yellowed slightly at the edges. My name was not on the outside. Robert's was. Inside were 4 handwritten pages. I recognized Richard's handwriting immediately. For a moment, I couldn't read them. Seeing the shape of his letters brought him back more vividly than any photograph. David stood. I'll give you privacy. Thank you. After he left, I began. Richard had written the letter nearly 8 years before his death. It was mostly about Silver Creek, about Robert's concerns, about developers, about preserving options. Then Richard wrote about Ryan. Our son is a good man, but he has always been too eager to prove he belongs in rooms where people have more than he does. I stopped. That sentence hurt. Not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. Richard continued. He wrote that Ryan had begun measuring success through other people's approval. Cars, titles, houses, connections. Richard worried that someday Ryan might confuse having more with being more. Then came the sentence that broke me. If I go before you do, and if Jordan ever gets caught in the middle of this family property, trust her judgment. I covered my mouth. Richard had written my name years before any of this happened. He had imagined a future in which I might be standing exactly where I was now. The letter continued. Jordan has never been impressed by money for its own sake. She knows what enough looks like. That may be the most valuable thing any of us can know. I cried then, not quietly, not gracefully. I cried like the widow I had been trying not to be for 3 years. When David returned, he placed a box of tissues beside me without saying anything. There's more, I whispered. I kept reading. Richard had not condemned Ryan. That mattered. He wrote about our son with love. He remembered Ryan helping an injured teammate in high school. He remembered him driving through the night when Robert had surgery. He remembered the young man beneath the ambition. Then Richard wrote, "If Ryan ever lets money lead him somewhere he shouldn't go, don't confuse rescuing him with loving him. Sometimes consequences are the only teachers our children will listen to." I read that sentence 4 times. David sat across from me. Robert underlined it. I looked down. He had. A faint pencil line ran beneath the words. Did Ryan ever see this? No. I folded the letter carefully. Maybe he should. David didn't answer. That wasn't a legal question. I know. What do you think? I think you already know. I did. The problem was that Ryan still wasn't speaking to me. Then 3 days later he came to Silver Creek. Sam saw his car first. I was sitting on the ranch house porch with coffee when a dark SUV appeared along the gravel road. My heart recognized my son before my eyes did. Ryan parked near the barn. He got out alone. No Ashley, no folder, no papers. He walked toward me with his hands in his jacket pockets. I stood. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Hi, Mom. Hi. Can I sit?" "It's a porch, Ryan." He almost smiled. We sat. The Colorado wind moved across the pasture. "Finally," he said. "Ashley lost Horizon Ridge. I heard. She thinks I ruined it." "Did you?" He looked at me. "I don't know." That was more honesty than I had heard from him in months. "She told them I could help with you," he said. "I told her I could." My chest tightened. Why? Because I wanted to be useful. To her, to everybody. He shook his head. "No, that's not true." I waited. To her. There it was. I wanted her to think I could bring something to the table. Ryan, I know how pathetic that sounds. It sounds human. He looked surprised. I kept thinking if I could help make this deal happen, Ashley would see me differently. Her clients would see me differently. Her family would. And me. He looked down. "I assumed you'd say yes. To 22 million. Yeah. Because you thought I needed the money, no." He swallowed. "Because I wanted part of what it could do. At last. No excuses. No family future. No concern about my retirement. Just truth." "I'm sorry," he said. I looked across the ranch. "Do you know what you're apologizing for going through Dad's papers?" I nodded. "For pushing the power of attorney." Another nod. "For letting Horizon Ridge believe I could influence you." "Yes." "And for getting angry when you wouldn't make the decision I wanted." I felt tears coming. Ryan's eyes were wet too. "I made your life into something I was already counting," he said. That was the sentence I had needed. I went inside and brought out Richard's letter. "What is that?" "Your father wrote it to Robert. When years ago." I handed it to him. Ryan read slowly. Halfway through he stopped, then continued. When he reached the line about consequences, his shoulders began shaking. I had not seen my son cry like that since Richard's funeral. Dad thought I was a disappointment. No. Ryan looked at me. "He wrote all this. He also wrote that you were a good man. A good man wouldn't have done what I did. A good man can do something wrong." He covered his face. I moved closer. This time when I reached for his hand, he let me take it. "I miss him," Ryan whispered. "So do I. I kept trying to become somebody he would respect. Your father respected you. I never felt successful enough. That wasn't coming from him." Ryan nodded slowly. "I know that now." We sat together for a long time. Eventually he asked, "Are you ever going to trust me again?" I could have given him the answer a mother is expected to give. Of course, everything is forgiven, let's forget it. But healing built on dishonesty is only another kind of pretending. "I hope so," I said. His face fell slightly. "But not today." He nodded. "I understand. I forgive you, Ryan." He looked at me. "Forgiveness and trust are different things." "I know. Trust comes back through what you do next." He folded Richard's letter carefully. "Can I keep this?" I thought about it. Then nodded. "It belongs with you now." Before he left, Ryan stood at the porch steps and looked across Silver Creek. "It's beautiful." "Yes. I never even came here before all this." "No. And somehow I thought I deserved a piece of it. I didn't answer. He looked at me. I don't want anything from the ranch, Mom. For the first time, I believed him. Not because he had finally said the right words. Because he had come without Ashley, without documents, without an offer, and without asking me for anything. After his car disappeared down the road, I remained on the porch. Richard's letter was gone from my hands, but his words remained. Sometimes consequences are the only teachers our children will listen to. Maybe he had been right. The consequences had cost Ryan something. They had cost Ashley something. They had cost me something too. But for the first time since the wedding, I no longer felt as though I was losing my son. I felt as though I might finally be meeting the man he could still choose to become. A year after the county hearing, I woke before sunrise at Silver Creek and realized I no longer thought of the ranch as something Robert had left me. It had become home. Not in the way my house in Fort Collins was home. That house still held 41 years of marriage, Ryan's childhood, Richard's crooked kitchen cabinet, and the maple tree outside my window. Silver Creek was different. It belonged to the woman I had become after losing Richard. For months I had asked myself what I should do with it. Keeping 1,850 acres simply because I was afraid to sell would have been its own kind of mistake. So David, Sam, and I spent nearly a year building a plan. I met conservation specialists, water attorneys, agricultural advisors, accountants. I learned more about easements than any 69-year-old woman should reasonably have to know. And eventually I made my decision. I would not sell Silver Creek to Horizon Ridge, but I also would not leave its future vulnerable to the next enormous check someone placed on a table. David helped structure a conservation trust that protected most of the ranch from large-scale development while preserving its agricultural use. The grazing land would remain grazing land. The most important water rights would stay connected to the long-term operation of Silver Creek. The ranch could adapt. It could earn income. It could change with the times. But no future Bennett would be able to wake up one morning, see enough zeros, and casually dismantle what generations had protected. When I signed the final documents, David looked at me. You understand this significantly limits what future beneficiaries can do. That's the point. He smiled. Robert would approve. What about Richard? Richard would probably complain about one paragraph. I laughed. That sounds more accurate. Horizon Ridge eventually revised its development. They found another access solution. It was more expensive and less convenient, but the project did not collapse because of me. That mattered. I had never wanted to destroy anybody's business. I had only refused to sacrifice Silver Creek to make their business easier. Ashley continued working in luxury real estate. Losing Horizon Ridge hurt her reputation for a while, but not permanently. She was talented. I had never denied that. What changed was the way she worked. At least that was what Ryan told me. She became more careful about what she promised clients. More careful about assuming personal relationships could solve professional problems. And according to Ryan, less interested in the Crestview house. They never bought it. For several months after the hearing, their marriage was strained. Ryan once told me that he and Ashley had been forced to admit something neither wanted to admit. They had begun treating success like a finish line that kept moving. A better house, a better client, a better car, a better circle of friends. Every time they reached one level, another appeared above it. I don't know when enough stopped being enough, Ryan told me. I knew. It happens quietly. Richard had understood that too. Ryan and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. That was important. There was no magical Sunday dinner where everything returned to normal. I didn't give him access to my accounts. I didn't make him my financial power of attorney. I didn't add his name to Silver Creek. And Ryan stopped asking. He called because he wanted to talk. He came to Fort Collins because he wanted to see me. Sometimes he drove to Silver Creek and helped Sam repair fences badly enough that Sam complained about him for days afterward. Once Ryan arrived with work gloves that looked as if they had never touched dirt. Sam looked at them and said, "Those decorative." Ryan laughed. Probably. By sunset, they weren't decorative anymore. That pleased me more than I admitted. Ashley came with him sometimes. The first few visits were awkward. She and I had never directly discussed the flowers, the financial questions, or the way she had suddenly called Silver Creek a family legacy. Eventually, one afternoon, she brought it up herself. We were sitting on the porch while Ryan helped Sam near the barn. "I was awful to you," she said. I looked at her. "You were ambitious." "No." She shook her head. "I was awful." I let her continue. "I looked at people through what they had." "That sounds exhausting." "It was." She smiled sadly. "I think I was scared of not having enough." "Enough what? Money? Security? Status?" She looked toward Ryan. Proof that I had made it. I understood that more than she probably expected. Fear can dress itself as ambition very convincingly. "I'm sorry about the wedding," she said. My chest tightened. "You knew I heard you," Ryan told me later. I looked away. "I said you didn't have anything." "Yes. I was wrong." I turned back toward her. "Ashley, even if I hadn't inherited Silver Creek, you would still have been wrong." She blinked. I continued. "I had a home, retirement income, friends, a 41-year marriage, a son I loved, a life I had built myself." Her eyes filled. "I know. The ranch didn't make me worth more. I know that now. That mattered. Not enough to erase what happened, enough to begin something better." There was another decision I had made about Silver Creek that surprised even David. The ranch generated income. Not $22 million check income. Real steady agricultural income. After expenses and reserves, there was enough to do something useful. I established the Richard Bennett Second Chapter Scholarship. The name embarrassed me at first. Richard would have hated having anything named after him. That was partly why I chose it. The scholarship supported women over 55 who wanted to return to school, learn a trade, earn a certification, or begin a new career after widowhood, divorce, caregiving, or another major life change. I knew what it felt like to wake up later in life and realize the future had changed without asking permission. I wanted other women to know that change did not mean the story was over. The first year we helped 6 women. One was a 61-year-old widow training in bookkeeping. When I read her application, I cried. Another was 58 and studying horticulture after spending 30 years caring for her family. One wanted to become a paralegal. One wanted to finish the nursing degree she had abandoned at 23. Those women gave Silver Creek a purpose no developer could have offered me. Ryan attended the first scholarship dinner. He didn't give a speech. He didn't ask to be introduced as my son. He simply helped carry chairs afterward. I noticed. Trust returns in small things, not promises, patterns. Several months later, Ryan and I stood near the southern pasture, where Sam had first explained that developers were not interested in the cattle. "You really made it impossible to sell?" Ryan asked. "Not impossible. Close enough that you'd need several lawyers of very good reason and possibly divine intervention." He laughed. "Smart." I looked at him. "Does it bother you?" He understood the question. Someday, Silver Creek might have passed to him without restrictions. Now it wouldn't. "No." He looked across the pasture. "A year ago it would have." I appreciated the honesty. "What changed?" "I stopped thinking inheritance was something parents owed their children." I said nothing. Ryan continued. "You and Dad already gave me a childhood and education, a place to come home to, and more chances than I deserved." He smiled faintly. "That should have been enough." I reached for his hand. This time there was no hesitation between us. Under the trust structure, Ryan would never have unilateral authority to sell Silver Creek. But I had not shut him out completely. David helped create a path allowing Ryan to serve on an advisory board someday, if he demonstrated consistent responsibility over time. Not because he was my son, because people can grow. I wanted the structure to recognize both truths. Boundaries matter. So do second chances. That evening, after Ryan and Ashley drove back to Denver, I sat alone on the ranch house porch. The Colorado sunset spread across the sky in layers of gold and pink. Cattle moved slowly in the distance. Silver Creek reflected the last light between the cottonwoods. I thought about Robert, then Richard, then the wedding. I could still see myself sitting at that beautifully decorated table, while Ashley told her mother I didn't really have anything. I remembered Ryan standing nearby and saying nothing. And I remembered the letter hidden inside my purse. What if I had taken it out? What if I had told them immediately I inherited Silver Creek Ranch, 1,850 acres, valuable water rights, strategic access, millions of dollars? Ashley might have hugged me. Ryan might have defended me. They might have treated me like the most important person at the wedding. And I might have mistaken all of that attention for love. My silence had been painful, but it had shown me something money could never buy. It showed me how people treated me when they believed there was nothing to gain. More importantly, it showed Ryan who he had become. And because I did not rescue him from that truth, he had been given the chance to become someone better. I looked toward the empty chair beside me. For just a moment, I could almost imagine Richard sitting there. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. I smiled. I had spent so much of the past year thinking this story was about protecting a ranch. It wasn't. It was about protecting the right to decide what happened to my own life. I had forgiven my son. I had begun forgiving Ashley, but I had not surrendered my boundaries to prove that forgiveness. I finally understood that those things could exist together. Love and limits, forgiveness and consequences, family and independence. I did not need to defeat my son. I did not need to make Ashley suffer. I did not need $22 million